I would like to call the El Monte City School District's Board of Education meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. Before I proceed, I hope that everyone, our parents, our teachers, our staff, our colleagues, our team here on the board, and our cabinet had a safe, healthy, and happy holiday season in company of your loved ones. These are definitely difficult times for all of us as we continue to follow safety guidelines to keep ourselves safe, but most of all, our loved ones safe during this pandemic. And now, as 2022 is here now, let's remain hopeful that this year will be better than last, and that it can and it will bring us much happiness and joy. And now, I will move on to roll call, beginning with Mrs. Cobian.
Present.
Ms. Mendez.
Present.
Mrs. Rivas.
Present.
Mr. Siegrist.
Present.
And Relas present. And now, if I can have everyone joining me for the flag salute, please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we will continue with our agenda, beginning with our items of interest. Number one, presentation, Senator Rubio's office. And before we present, I really want to acknowledge and just let you know that we are honored this evening to welcome Senator Susan Rubio to our El Monte City School District this evening. Senator Rubio has been working tirelessly for our communities, and as a longtime teacher, Senator Rubio understands the needs of our students and our families and how to best help and assist them in the path to success. With this said, I want to please encourage you in helping me to welcome our state Senator Susan Rubio. Senator Rubio, the floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to say hello to each and every one of you. I know it's a little late, but I congratulate the South El Monte Emergency Resource Association. I know that they're being recognized, but also our school board members and our superintendent and all our school community. As the board president stated, I was a teacher and also vice principal, so I recognize all the work that you have to do during these difficult times and navigating COVID. And so again, my thank you to all the teachers and everyone in the school community that makes it work, because I know I could only thank you. I don't know how you are doing it. It's a lot of work. So to all the parents out there, let's always make sure that we thank our teachers that work so hard, and administrators and everyone that helps in these efforts. But going back to a wonderful organization that I had the honor to work with and see firsthand what they do for our community. I want to thank the South El Monte Emergency Resource Association for doing everything that we know is needed, especially during these difficult times. I have seen them put together emergency food packages, give out clothing. I know that they offer transportation. In particular, as a teacher, I can tell you how thankful I am that they also provide uniforms for school children and school supplies. And we know that's also a challenge sometimes in our city community. So thank you again. I had the privilege of recognizing them as my nonprofit of the year in 2020, once again, because I know that they're instrumental in what they do for our children and our families. And I understand that they've been doing this for almost 66 years. So that takes a lot of commitment and dedication. In particular, I want to thank the leadership of the board, and that is the executive director, Lillian Reyes, and all of her staff, volunteers, and again, all the members that really make this organization what it is. It's truly a testament of the love they have for their community and the compassion that they have for others. And once again, I have seen them in action myself. I've had the privilege to join them and participate, and we collaborated with food and toys and other items. And it's really wonderful to feel welcomed and included in something so wonderful as taking care of our communities. So today, once again, with the honor of representing not only as a state senator, but also as a community member and as a teacher, I want to read a certificate. I did provide a certificate of recognition that they should have in person, but if I may, this certificate is on behalf of the California State Senate. It is my privilege to present the certificate in recognition of your outstanding work and dedication to helping our families in need throughout the San Gabriel Valley. Your commitment and invaluable contributions for our most vulnerable residents is an inspiration to all of us. So Lillian, Ray, if you are listening, thank you so much for your friendship and thank you so much for what you do. But I also want to take a moment to recognize the entire community that came out to support those efforts. And it starts with Dr. Maribel Garcia all the way down to everyone that helped pack the food and really pass out the food. And there's a long list. So in order to be respectful and mindful of your time and your agenda, I won't read all the names of the volunteers, but please know that if I could, I would, but I just will read one. On behalf of the California State Senate, it is my privilege to present you with this certificate in recognition of your outstanding volunteerism and helping out with the El Monte South El Monte Emergency Resource Association. I applaud your dedication, generous contributions, and commitment to serving others. I want to express my deep admiration for your compassion and your hard work in supporting our San Gabriel Valley residents, and that's to all of you. Again, I wish I could be there in person to really highlight each one of you, but please know that all of you are appreciated, and hopefully we continue to do this year after year. Thank you to the school board. I just wanted to also share with our school board members that I have several pieces of legislation right now that will help our schools. And so when the time comes, I hope to continue to work with you collaboratively to make sure that we make education better for our students and circumstances better for our teachers and our school community. So thank you very much, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful evening.
Board members stand up, and if I could just have Indra, maybe you on this side, Lillian, you on this side, and get a picture of this accolade. When we show your grandkids, Lillian, we're going to tell them there was a pandemic going on. All right. Robert and Becca. All right, this is going to be a good one.
So far away.
Lillian, do you want to hold your certificate up? See it? There you go. Switch it. We normally have together.
Okay, okay, yeah. I was telling Maribel, what a beautiful facility. I love it. You guys are lucky. Look at this. All of you, you look so beautiful up there. Yeah. And you know, these certificates that were given by the senator, Of course, it's not just one person that does all of this, because every one of you in this room has helped ERA at one time or another. You've given me names of families that need assistance, and we've helped. We never say no. And I just can't thank you enough, and the senator also for recognizing us. But, you know, it does take a village. And look at you guys right now. Thank you so much, and have a blessed new year. And we'll get over that. We'll get over all of this stuff that's happened last year. But we're moving on. We'll be okay. God said so. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Thank you to the El Monte, South El Monte Emergency Resources Association for doing so much, not just for our El Monte families, but for our entire San Gabriel Valley. So thank you so much for all you do. And also, and once again, thank you to Senator Susan Rubio for recognizing all of the amazing work that the entire village does for our communities. So thank you so much. And with that, we will continue on to our second item on our items of interest. Our El Monte City School District Academic Diagnostic number 2 with Ms. Virginia Castro.
Thank you, President Redas. So it's my honor tonight to present our second diagnostic. It feels like just yesterday I was here presenting our Diagnostic 1. This year is just flying by. But here I am tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about our Diagnostic 2 academic baseline data. So first, starting off with our overall performance. What we've compared here is starting with, if you see the very first column, it says 1920 D2. And this is our second diagnostic data from the last normal school year that we had, and that was 1920 before we entered into the pandemic. And then the following two columns are the Diagnostic 1 data, which I shared with you previously, and then the recent Diagnostic 2 21-22 school data. And right in the middle of the screen, you see California in school reading, and at the very end of your screen, you see California in school math. So what those two numbers represent is how California is doing as a whole. And we inserted this graph in here so that you can see how we are comparing to statewide data, and that's important to note. So why didn't we include 2021 data? Because it was so sporadic, because that was when we were closed for the majority of the school year. We can't really rely on that data because there were so many extenuating factors. So if you remember Dr. Garcia saying over and over again, we were so excited about the 1920 school year because we had made such great gains that year. And we really thought that the dashboard was going to reflect it, that the students scoring on grade level and above grade level on the SBAC we're going to show. So I have really good news today, because if you see how we are 1920 Diagnostic 2 data compared to how we are currently in our 21-22 Diagnostic 2 data, the difference is not that great. So the media tells us, and we hear all the time, these dramatic losses that the kids have experienced, students of color, which are the students that we serve in El Monte, they're the ones that are pairing out the worst during the pandemic. And I've said it before, and now we have proof, we're not seeing that because of the hard work of our principals and our teachers. And this morning when we met with our administrators, I gave them accolades, and I hope that those accolades trickle down to the classroom teachers, because this shows the tenacity and this shows the rigor of what we did even during the school closures, and that our kids are where they're at. So let's just talk a little bit about the data. I can ramble on and on about how great our people are, but so in 1920, we had 18% of our students that were above grade level or mid-grade level, and in this Diagnostic 2, we see the same amount. The only one that's a little bit lower is the early on grade level. And if we look down, we always want to see big numbers of green, right? Our 2 green marks, we want to see big. Our middle is the ones that are 1 grade level or below, and then our pink and our red are the ones that we focus on. And those are the students that are scoring 2 grade levels or 3 or more. But compared to where we were in Diagnostic 1, you see that as a district in reading, we've demonstrated great gains. Our students that were 3 or more grade levels below, we had a huge decrease from 23% to 17%. Our students that were 2 grade levels below, we had a 5% decrease from 20 to 15%, and there was an increase in the green. In math, we didn't see that great of the gains that we did in D1. In 1920 D2, but we're not that far off. So 11% of students that were 2 grade levels below compared to 15%, 11%, 3 or more grade levels below compared to 14%. And if we look at the top, I want to draw your attention to D1 and D2. So we started the school year, 22% of our students were 3 or more grade levels below. We reduced that number to 14%. 23% of the students were 2 grade levels below. We reduced that number to 15%. And we started with only 15% of our students at or above grade level, and those numbers increased to 27%. So if you look at the state average, we are right on track with the state. 27% of the students in California are where we are currently. Not quite where we were in 1920, but we'll get there. So overall, district-wide, this is very good news for us. When we look at our grade levels, so this again is the second diagnostic from 1920 starting with grade 1, how we did in Diagnostic 1, how we did in Diagnostic 2. So it's first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and then the district average. So I just want to give you guys a moment to look at this data. Again, we want to see the increase of the green from D1 to D2. You can compare it to 1920 to see how we're pairing overall. If you look at second grade, we started our Diagnostic 1, 45% of our students were 2 grade levels below. That decreased to 31%. Third grade also had major gains. Fourth grade, you can't see it on this slide, but one of the slides that I already presented to our staff today was how our students had a year's growth or more in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in a 10-week window. So our teachers were able to increase in 10 weeks a whole year's worth of growth for their kids. And they were very impressed. They shared that their data team said, "What is Almani doing? Because we're not seeing this type of growth anywhere." But again, this is the reading grade comparison for 5th grade. Again, if you compare D2 in 1920 to D2 in 21-22, 30? I should have added these before I presented. 31 compared to 30. So we're actually in a better place than we were in 1920. And I won't embarrass myself by trying to do the math because there are teachers in the room and they're going to say, "Virginia, you need to go back to the classroom." But I just want you to take a quick look at that. Are there any comments about the reading data or any questions I can answer for the board at this time?
I have a question about that. Is it been desegregated for girls and boys? Is that
I'll show you the subgroups. That's the next slide that's coming up.
okay? Thank you.
I think that was my cue to move on. Okay. So math. Did we do math? I don't think we did math. Okay. So this is math. First grade. Again, my biggest focus is when I look at the D1 and the D2. So Diagnostic 1 data, we want to see those increases in the green. This is dramatic in first grade. Those kids we had a 9% on grade level or above grade level, and they increased to 21%. From 23% that were 2 grade levels below to only 9%. So we're seeing a reduction in the kids that are really struggling, are limited learners, and then those increases in the growth. Look at third grade. Third grade, 8% of the students started the school year in Diagnostic 1 at or above grade level, and now 25% are there. So when we look at this data, we would like to see 100% of all of our kids in the green, but that's not our reality. And like I showed you with the California, it's not the state's reality either, but it does indicate that we're on the right track. So by the third diagnostic, what we want to see is a lot more green, a lot less red, a lot less pink. And we're hoping that if we continue on this trajectory, that's exactly what we're going to see. So here's 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th compared to district-wide. And again, compared to where we were in that year that was very celebratory for us, we're right on track. Okay, subgroup data. Here it is, Mr. Segrest. So these numbers, sometimes I've shared this in the past, they're a little bit deceiving because our groups are not as big. And I can tell you that our Asian students, our Latino students make up the biggest, our biggest subgroups. But in American Indian or Alaskan, you can see from Diagnostic Window 1 to Diagnostic Window 2, we had a lot of students, 12% move into at or above grade level. Our Asian students continue to do well. From D1 to D2, we saw a lot more gains in the green and a lot of decrease in the 3 or more grade levels below and the 2 grade levels below. Black and African American students and our Filipino students, what we always want to see is upward growth. And that's exactly what we're seeing in every subgroup. Here's our Hispanic or Latino students. That's very dramatic gains. So 18% to 29%. And again, those articles that we get sent by EdSource and WestEd and how our students of color are the ones most impacted. This makes me very proud of our district and the work that we're doing because we see that our subgroups are still continuously growing and that the gaps are decreasing. So here is the English language acquisition. So our ELs are always an area of focus for us. We've done a lot of work with our ELs in the past year. And again, we see very dramatic growth. Our English only and our IFEPs and our RFEPs. So our IFEPs are those students that are initially fluent in English. So when they take the LPAC upon enrollment, they have a language, a native language at home, and they're already bilingual, fluent in English. The RFEPs are the ones that we reclassify as being fluent in English. And these two groups historically have done very well, but you can see how well they continue to do in our district. They exceed our EOs. So our plan is that all of our ELs become RFEPs and that we continue to see this upward growth. So in reading programs, in school district programs in the area of reading, we have the students with 504s, our foster students, our homeless, our migrant ed, our socially, economically disadvantaged, and our special ed. So you know that these are our most vulnerable students. And when we look at this data, it gives us a lot of great joy to see that the resources that we've put into these students to making sure that their loss of academic growth is minimal, and we can see that the programs that we put in place, we had a homeless summer camp for our homeless students this year. We have our migrant ed program. We have a counselor dedicated to foster youth. We have a counselor dedicated to 504s. So all of these things, we can see the gains and we can see also the areas. And I do want to point out special ed. I think that this is the biggest growth that we've seen in special ed. So 4% of our students with disability started at grade level or above, and that increased to 8%. So again, not where we want to be, but they doubled. So if we continue on this trajectory, we're going to continue to see great growth. In math, these are our subgroups. Asian, huge growth. Filipino also had great growth from 14% to 38%. Our Hispanic and Latinos, 9% to 19%. But I want to point out our 3 grade levels below went from 25% to 17%. Language acquisition, so our ELs, again, in math, this continues to be a focus area district-wide, because if you looked at the state data, statewide California doesn't perform as well in the area of math. So it's a constant area of focus for us. But our EOs, our IFEPs, and our RFEPs. Programs, 504, foster, homeless, migrant ed, socially, economically disadvantaged, and special ed. Again, lots of growth and decrease in the years that they're working below grade level. Any questions, comments, concerns? Yes, Mr. Segrist.
Did you factor in attendance of the students and relate that to their progress or lack thereof? Was it for attendance? That could be brought in, couldn't it? As far
It
as-
could be. We
a
could see. The sporadic attendance in the 2021 school year is why we didn't include that data, because we didn't think it was valid data. But this year, all the students that were present in school, and even the kids in independent studies, they took the diagnostic exam. So if we performed very low in an area grade level that's been hit hard with attendance, we could factor that in. But right now, what we're seeing is the opposite. So given the attendance concerns that we've been facing, our students continue to learn. And I do want to point out that we're not seeing the type of learning loss that we're hearing about and we're reading about. And to us, that's a huge reason to celebrate, because I'm sure you've read articles, and we get articles about school districts that their students are coming to them. Not to say that we don't see it, but we're addressing it, and we're not so far off the last normal school year we had.
And another question about special ed. Is there any way to deal with autistic children as a group to see how they do as compared to the other special ed children?
We could pull that data. We could disaggregate by disability. Normally, the way the state looks at the special ed data is just if a child has an IEP. But we could look at the type of disability they have, if it's a speech and language or a processing disorder or a spectrum disorder. We could look at all of those things.
Okay, thank you.
I have a few questions. Oh,
Well, when we disaggregate special ed data with the special ed department, now that especially Mr. Juan Munoz is the director, I'm sure that the level of desegregation that goes on in that department is to that specificity. But for our purposes, we look at special ed as a whole.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Mendez.
no worries. So just some clarifying questions. So the 2019-2020 D2, what month was that taken in? That was before like the March closure?
That would have been the same time, so it would have been in January. So
Okay,
we were still in school full time when that happened.
Okay, so that condition was in person. Okay.
Yes,
And then for obviously D1, that's in person, just normal conditions.
yes.
Okay.
That
And-
was this year.
Okay. And obviously, we do know I always like to say, it's always, we have to take into account students are taking, it's an individual assessment, it's computer-based, it can be affected by motivation. So I kind of know those factors. What conditions do you think contributed? Then obviously, we see how, during D1, you see a lot of students who were below grade level, and obviously now we see a decrease, which meaning progress. So what conditions do you think, was it more of the testing of them, okay, we're back in the swing of things, or what other conditions do you think played in that?
I think the learning that's happening in the classroom is why we're seeing the growth. So to say that 2021 D1 was a normal year, I think is not quite accurate. I think they came back with death shields, they came back with masks, they came back with all of these extenuating circumstances that are causing them a lot of stress. They came back with a lot of trauma. I think that the growth that we've seen in D2 is a result of the hard work that our teachers are doing to look at the data, to align their lessons, to address the data that they're seeing, the work that our principals are doing to address that data and the learning gaps, the types of reports that we've been analyzing. And I also think that our counselors and the work they've been doing to address the trauma, the fact that, I know Ms. Jenny Lee's going to be presenting, but the fact that our kids are fed, even if they go home quarantined or in independent study, I think all of those factors, how we just embrace our kids as a community and we make sure that they're succeeding. If kids don't show up, our outreach consultants are knocking on their door. I think that I can speak for the entire district as a whole when I say that we will not let our kids fail. So all of the conditions that even we can't control, we're going to find a way to address them. What's happening in the classroom, I say, is data-driven instruction. And I think that that's what you're seeing in these raw numbers, is the focus on the data, the focus on the small group instruction, the fact that our principals and our teachers were so creative on how they set up their classrooms, despite the shields. I mean, we have kidney tables with, little desks all around the kidney tables. We have teachers that are themselves moving from groups to groups in their classrooms because we ask them not to have their kids move around. So that creativity and that commitment and that desire to see our kids succeed is why we're seeing the gains that we're seeing.
Thank you. No, that you're right, because we always expect after summer break, right?
Sure.
To see a little bit of a regression. That's normal. And then that's why I-Ready is so great, or any type of assessment to see, okay, what skills do I need to review that maybe some students lost during the summer? So you're right. It gave some great information to teachers to know, okay, these are the areas that students are struggling in. Now let's provide that support. And yeah, across the board, you're seeing that pattern. So it really does speak to the
Huge
great
growth.
work.
And one of the
we're
reasons
doing.
why we purchased already as a district is because it's so aligned to the SBAC exam, right? And it's so aligned to the blueprints and what the kids need to learn in order to be successful at the next grade level. So when we look at these reports, and there's a new one that we just rolled out to our principals, the Common Core state standards, right? It tells you every single child, every single standard that they still need, every single standard that they've mastered, and the ones that are partially met. So if our teachers just look at that report, they can plan out the rest of the school year, and they're going to teach the kids exactly what they need to learn, not only for the SBAC, because that's really not our final goal. It's a nice perk, right, to get all green on the dashboard, but our main goal is to prepare students for the following school year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just had a technical question. I know parents usually get their reports. When would parents expect to see their individual student reports from this round?
I'm assuming it's going to happen in parent conference time, so you'll get the report card and the I-Ready, but I can follow up.
Okay. And then another kind of question is, does I-Ready project? Like, do they say, based off of this, we would expect, at the next one, the students?
Yes,
fall into?
so, we have a projected proficiency report, and our principals have been looking at that as well. So they can kind of get an estimate on how many kids are going to be proficient, what grade levels are going to do well. We get a report specifically if the kids just learn what we expect them to learn, and then the stretch growth. So we told our principals, sorry teachers, every single child must master their stretch growth, because we wanted to make sure that we were going to defy the odds, and we're seeing that. So I'm just extremely thrilled.
Oh, thank you. And I think it just speaks to the high expectations we have for all the kids.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. Do we have any other questions? Perfect. Well, thank you, Ms. Castro, and that definitely speaks about, as you mentioned, the commitment of our district, of our teachers, the creativity, right, and how they're really particular about analyzing the data for that continued growth in all of our students. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And we will continue now with our nutrition services with Ms. Jenny Lee.
President Ruedas and members of the governing board, Ms. Jenny Lee is our Director of Nutrition Services. She joined our district in the summer of 2020, and she's going to update the board and the community today on some of the great things and the fun things that we've been doing in our nutrition services program in her time here. She joined us a couple months into the pandemic, and she continued doing a lot of the great work and elevated some of the work that we started at the start of the pandemic. So I'll turn over to Mrs. Lee so she can update the board on all the happenings in nutrition services.
Thank you for the introduction. Good evening, board and esteemed cabinet members, families that are tuning in this evening. My name is Jenny Lee. I am the Director of Nutrition Services, and I'm proud to be up here today providing an update on what we've been doing in our department. So I wanted to just quickly introduce myself and my family. I am a registered dietitian and a mom of two, as you can see in the photo. Arthur was just born a couple months ago. But I also want to take this opportunity just to share some gratitude for welcoming me graciously to the El Monte City School District family. I have had the past 18 months that were just wonderful serving alongside our staff here at Nutrition Services, and I'm so incredibly blessed to be working with them as we move on. So I'd like to start with the end in mind, and that's our mission. So the El Monte City School District Nutrition Services Department will provide free and healthy meals and offer high-quality nutrition programs to promote healthy lifestyles and achieve academic success while supporting El Monte City goals and standards. Now, I want to mention that this is an evolving mission statement. So as we continue to look at our schools and serving our students with an equity lens, that we continue to revisit our mission statement so that we ensure that we are meeting the needs of our students. Moving on, I wanted to brief you on the 3 objectives that we hold true in our department. The first being to increase meal quality and expand access to school meals. Simply put, we want to just prepare meals and serve our students food that they want to eat. And that requires a lot of surveying our students, looking at our meal quality. Secondly, we want to seek out opportunities to act as a food and nutrition hub for our community, as we were able to do so last year through the pandemic. Our second objective is to support sustaining nutrition education programs. We know that serving our students healthy meals can also be a teaching moment. And so we want to continue these nutrition education programs by strengthening existing partnerships and finding opportunities to meet our students where they are. And aside from our students, our most important stakeholder in our department are our staff. And so we want to continue to support them by providing professional development and find ways to support their well-being, their wellness, because we know that we can accomplish our goals with a healthy and well-fed team. All right, so I just wanted to take a quick look back at our pandemic feeding model starting in March 2020 till June 2021. We were able to serve over 5.5 million meals curbside to our families. And that's a huge accomplishment, knowing that our schools were closed. And it's totally a different tradition from our traditional model of serving our students. We were also able to serve our students safely that came on campus with our learning pods and our spring reopening. And as we continue to work on minimizing as much food waste as possible, and through our partnership with our Savior Center, we were able to donate over 3 truckloads of food that we weren't able to serve during our curbside distributions. I also wanted to mention that we ended the year last year with a fund balance of $4 million, bringing us out of the red. And now that we're on a CDE spending plan, we are able to do a lot more in our department. And something that's really important to me is that last year we had 100% staff retention within our department. And I know it was a huge challenge for many other districts to staff their kitchens. And we had our staff coming in 4:30 a.m. and staying till 7 p.m., no matter what day it was. So how did we start this year? We wanted to return to pre-pandemic operations as much as possible, with a few modifications to ensure COVID safety. So we were happy to return breakfast in the classroom to our schools, serving our students through the lunch line, which enabled us to provide hot meals. We were happy to continue serving our programs that were on campus as well, including Head Start, preschool, now early Head Start, and supper and snack for our Aspire After School program. And the modifications that we made this year were just a few, but it started with the packaging of our meal components so that we can minimize as much touch of our food. We removed the salad bars and share tables just temporarily until times are safe for us to bring those back. Schools extended their lunch schedules and removed their lunch keypads to speed up the lunch line as quickly as possible and maintain our stable cohorts as they were picking up lunch and going to their lunch tables. This year, we also updated our website so parents can easily access all menus online, both in English and in Spanish, as well as all of our nutrition labels and allergy information. Now, this took a lot of work, but we were able to put everything that we serve in our cafeteria is online. We are 100% transparent about what we serve our students, and so at any moment, a parent can go online and look at a label of what we've been serving. We also added a page with nutrition education resources for our staff and families to view. So how are we doing this year compared to 2 years ago, pre-pandemic? As you can see with our breakfast participation, we are averaging only about 63% in meal participation. Now, I want to note we did not adjust the data for attendance, which can certainly play a factor in what the numbers are showing today. But we also want you to know that we're very motivated by this, as well as our lunch numbers as well. So for lunch, we are just shy of what we were doing pre-pandemic. We're about 81% average lunch participation. And I can assure you that we will be looking into ways to improve our menu and reach our students more so that they are coming through our lunch lines like they were in the past. Now, I can't talk about this year without just briefing you on the global supply chain crisis and how it has impacted our program locally. First, we are seeing challenges with purchasing the items that we were able to in the past. At the height of the pandemic, many manufacturers decided to streamline and reduce the number of items that they were offering because demand just wasn't there. I mean, as you can remember, the meal boxes that we were distributing had mostly grocery items, and they were items that were different from what we normally serve in our cafeterias. And that's how it was at many other districts. So the move for manufacturers to change the number of offerings has certainly impacted us moving forward. Secondly, we're experiencing delays and cancellation of orders. Manufacturers have been struggling to keep up with demand now that schools have reopened. So districts are being asked to change their menus, substitute items, use different supplies. I was just at Cortada a few weeks ago, and the students made it a point to bring up to me that we were missing the straws in their spork sets. Just little nuances like that, but it means a lot to the students. So it has been a challenge for us, but in the next slide, I'll show you what we've been doing to overcome these challenges. And then lastly, the third challenge, and I know that we're experiencing this now, even in our district, are staff shortages. This impacts all sectors of the supply chain, from manufacturing to shipping to production and serving. So it has been a huge challenge globally, and we are getting letters and emails from our distributors almost weekly letting us know that something isn't going to show up on our delivery truck, or we're not going to be able to get grapes in this month. So we are trying to overcome these by offering different items to our students. So our strategy is just like it was last year and the years past, is we just do whatever it takes to serve our students. We started off with procurement, and CDE has issued several flexibilities for districts to enter into emergency contracts and increase the micro-purchase threshold from $10,000 to $50,000. And what that means is we don't have to go out to bid or find formal quotes to find the food and the supplies that we need to feed our students. We have issued several POs, and I am meeting with other vendors to make sure that we have backup plans for those backup plans in place. An example of some of the things that we're doing strategically with procurement is we are placing our orders well in advance. I'm talking 4 to 6 weeks at least of the menu date. I'm already starting to order things that we will see on the menu in March. And that's with the hope that we can get 80% of those items in. And whenever we can, we stock up on emergency goods and any supplies that we can get our hands on. So maybe the sporks are missing the straws to the set, but at least we have sporks. Menu changes. Now, this is our least favorite option. We don't like to change our menu. It interrupts production. We don't like to see our kids disappointed, but there are times that we have to make those changes. And to avoid as many food substitutions as possible, we have limited our menu choices to a 4-week lunch cycle and a 2-week cycle for breakfast, supper, and snack. What that means is for lunch, you'll see 20 different items versus 25 if we had a 5-week cycle. When we are desperately short on staff in our central kitchen, we pivot to a less labor-intensive menu item in order for us to catch up. So last week, for example, we had to change one of our items so that we could serve burritos, but then 2 days we were able to catch up and serve the orange chicken and chow mein. And then lastly, when it comes to staffing, we are so fortunate to have staff willing to work. We have asked all of our part-time staff to work extra hours, and they're all willing to do so. We have deployed our central kitchen staff to cover our school kitchen so that none are left uncovered. And then we've had to rely on maintenance and operations as well as our central warehouse for driver coverage because it's so important that we don't skip a beat in our department. Now, before I move on to our goals and our future, I wanted just to revisit our objectives because this will set the framework for the next couple of slides that I will be going over. So, at the heart of our program, we want to increase meal quality and access for our students. And like I mentioned, that just means putting things on the menu that the kids want to eat. Now that we're on a spending plan, I know Mr. Herrera has asked us to put filet mignon on the menu one of these days. I'm still working towards it, but the supply chain crisis has made it a challenge. But we will be purchasing higher quality foods as we move forward. We also have just recently hired our nutrition services operations coordinator, who happens to be a chef, so double bonus. She has a lot of ideas on making vegetables taste good and the different things that we can do with the USDA commodities that we get. So we're excited to have her on board as well. We also will be investing in new equipment. We have 20, 30-year-old ovens out there that need an upgrade. So we'll be working our way through all of our schools to update our equipment, purchasing a new refrigerated truck, which will enable us to increase our meal distributions as well. And when safe to do so, we certainly want to bring back our salad bars, our share tables, and offer more entrees and variety to our menus. And now that all of our students are virtual or have access to computers, we want to find creative ways to solicit their feedback. If we can't do a taste test, we could do Instagram story survey or something like along those lines. But we definitely want to hear back from our students. And to increase our access to meals, we want to make every best effort to provide meals during breaks because we know that our students rely on our school meals even when school's out. Next, nutrition education. So I'm going to go on a little tangent, but I wanted to share a little bit as to why I, as a registered dietitian, decided to go into school food. From a clinical setting, we often recommend to patients a special diet, like eating a healthier protein, incorporating more whole grains, but then we send them home, and they may or may not have access to those things. But in the school food service setting, we have a very unique and rare opportunity to do both. We get to educate our students about healthy eating from like babies and toddlers now that we have early Head Start. And we also get to provide them the access to those meals, breakfast, lunch, and supper, and snack for our students. So I love that. I love that we can make this bigger impact for our community by providing them the nutrition education and the meals to go with it. And so I think it's very important that we not only focus on the food aspect of our program, but the opportunity to educate our students as they do go hand in hand. And we can do this by certainly strengthening school, parent, and community partnerships to provide nutrition education in the classroom, virtually at home now, and for the community at large. We have access to Dairy Council and LACO nutrition education resources that we'll be sharing with our schools. I've tried to find as many opportunities to partner with our Jeff Seymour Family Resource Center and our Spire After School program to provide nutrition education and cooking demos. And we'll soon be reconvening our wellness committee. I know it went on a little hiatus, but it will be coming back, and it will serve as a forum for our students, our parents, and our school administrators and staff, as well as community members to discuss the priorities for our wellness in our district. And then we'll also have several dietetic interns that will help to support nutrition education goals through our district. Okay, and then lastly, but certainly just as important, is that we want to support our greatest resource in our team, and that's our staff. We have applied for kitchen infrastructure and training funds that the CDE will release soon that will help us provide professional development programs such as culinary techniques, customer service, food safety, computer skills, food service management, and nutrition, as well as upgrading all of our kitchens so that our staff have the tools they need to succeed. We know that we can accomplish our 2 objectives with our team because they have shown time and time again that they will step up to the challenge as long as we continue to support them. And so I wanted just to end with a huge thank you to our school lunch heroes. I know we did that back in May, but I can't speak enough about our team here. Just 67 men and women who are completely and wholeheartedly dedicated to serving our students and our community. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee, for your amazing presentation. This really highlights all the amazing work and the effort, everything that happens. So I know that it takes a great leadership such as you. But now I want to open the floor and see if my fellow board members have any questions for Mrs. Lee.
Just a quick one. Get good reviews from my kids on the food.
Good.
So, yeah. The other is that there was a question about some of the other partners that we had before, like Subway and some of the other ones. Are those going to be coming back in the future, or is that still? Are we doing that again? I guess that's the question.
Yeah, as we reconvene the wellness committee and look at that, I know in the past we had a lot of grants, right? And we're really going to look at developing a nutrition education program that is sustainable going forward. So if there is a grant or the funding is not there, right? Because we know there's a lot of one-time funding right now, right? And that will come and go, that the systems remain in place, right? And that's something that we're really looking at as we look to partner, right, with all of our partners, right? So we've identified a lot of good partners, right? We have a lot of partners from the past that we're looking to bring in. And just right now with some of the health restrictions, and there's a lot of things on the plates of our school employees, right? Bringing kids back into the classroom, right? Nutrition education is very important. And we hope to, as soon as things, calm down a little bit with the surge, we can start introducing more and more resources to our schools, because the best nutrition education program is one that's organic, right? One that is embedded within the curriculum so that our teachers, our schools, right, empower our students and our parents to support their kids. So we have all those resources from years past, and we're going to be, make sure that we re-engage those partners. And we've also created a lot of new partners in the past year or two, right, during the pandemic, right? So we're looking at ways to also eliminate food waste, right? Not that we have much food waste that goes on, but Jenny has some bright ideas of how we could really partner with some partners in the community, so we can make sure that there's virtually zero food waste, and if there is any excess food, that we make sure that we get in the hands of those individuals that would be most in need of that.
Thank you. And thank you for all that you've been doing. It's been wonderful to see for the last 2 years, basically, all the work that's gone into feeding everyone.
Thank you. I know we still have a lot of work to do, but we're excited.
I have a question. So about exploring other ways programs. And so I know, and tell me, and correct me if I'm wrong, right? What is, because I know there's a lot of health regulations when it comes to like food, right? So say a student takes that milk, right? Or, and then they want to give it back, right? So what's the regulations now when it comes to food that isn't used and it's still packaged, right?
Right. So I actually prepared a slide just in case you asked about food waste. So let me go to that. We, of course, always want to reduce food waste in our schools. It can't be completely eliminated because part of CDE requirements is that we always have a meal ready for a student that comes through our door. But here are some of the things that we've been doing in our department. And that's first, we try to put items on the menu that students want to eat and not throw in the trash can. And so that's an ongoing mission of ours. Secondly, we continue to strengthen communications with our school staff. A lot of times Teachers might have a classroom party or they go on a field trip. I know that's not happening right now, but that could contribute to some of the food waste that we're seeing. We've implemented strategies such as batch cooking, and that's heating up food as students come and just checking to make sure that we're not heating all 400 servings at once. Serving items not served or heated the next day to avoid waste. And that's something that we've been practicing with our breakfast in the classroom model, for example, because we have packaged the components together and we're not having the students reach in and touch every single milk carton or apple and muffin, that we are able to utilize those meals that we have not served the next day so that we can try to avoid throwing those in the trash. When safe again, we want to reintroduce our share tables. I know that was a huge thing that we had at all of our schools because there are students that might want to have 2 or 3 servings of fruit or vegetables or milk when others don't. And then, again, working towards donations to our community partners. There is a Good Samaritan law that we can certainly exercise where if meals are heated and we donate it, we are released of any liability of that food item. Now, we don't really have that much that we toss in the trash at the end of the day. We try to avoid it as much as possible. But we are looking into some new partners, such as an app where we can connect like Uber Eats and let them know, hey, we have 30 burritos at Cortada and 2 cases of apple slices that we won't be able to serve today. Who can we connect with? And they'll be able to pick it up and take it to somewhere else. So those are the new technologies that we're seeing. But first and foremost, we want to prevent food waste at the start of our chain. And then we have definitely utilized our partnership with our Savior Center. Anytime that our central kitchen has something, that, pallets of food that we can't serve, that we donate to them as well.
And do other waste programs, are we looking at, I didn't know the state's going in that direction, right? Having like a composting option now.
Yes, so that's with looking at green waste, and that would be like a district-wide effort, starting with educating our students and our staff, having 3 different color bins that we would see at Costco, for example. And I know that a lot of the waste management companies offer programs that we can engage in as a district.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions?
No questions, but just a comment to say thank you.
Yes,
very
I would
much.
salute you and thank you for what you're doing. I could not believe you're feeding millions of meals out there, that in the first place. Also, I saw an abbreviation there that I was curious. What is M&O? There was an M and O?
Maintenance and operations. Maintenance and operations.
Okay. And a question, do the children bring lunches to school anymore?
They do, but we often see them still getting a milk or a couple of the fruit and vegetable going through our lunch line.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I was just saying thank you for feeding our kids, and that I really loved the way you laid out your presentation with the mission and the goals, just so clearly stated and enthusiastically shared. So thank you for that. I'm very excited about the Wellness Committee reconvening and bringing some of the nutrition education back to the classrooms. Way back when I was first on the board and my kids were really little, that was a big part of what was happening in the day. And I can remember them coming home pretty enthusiastically sharing about a new fruit or vegetable that they got to try in the classroom.
Yes.
So I know that those programs are really effective. So thank you.
As certainly as we, get away from the pandemic, hopefully soon, that we can bring back our salad bars and incorporate Harvest of the Month. I think that was the program that you were mentioning, back in our classrooms and providing our teachers with the resources that they need to educate our kids.
Thank you. Ms. Lee, so I have a question. Please know that I really commend you. I mean, the objectives, right, of what's going on in our nutrition services. I do have a question in regard to your first objective, increase meal quality. So it says here, serve meals that students want to eat. What method are we using to know this information?
So the simplest one is called the plate waste method, and that's when we go to a school site and we look at the trash cans, right? We ask the custodians, hey, how much of this item did the kids throw away? And they right off the bat, they'll be able to tell us. The second method that we've been soliciting feedback is from our staff, our frontline staff that are serving our students. They will have tons to say about the different items that we've been offering. We've been getting a lot of positive feedback about our lunches, but we've also been getting some comments on ways that we can improve the quality. For example, we got a comment recently about our bread being hard by the way that we've been packaging it and heating it up at the school site. So we were able to pivot and change the way that we repackaged our bread.
That's wonderful. If we have any other comments, questions, we thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, Ms. Lee.
Thank you.
Great. And now we'll move on to our communications section. We'll begin with public comments. We do have 2 public comments today, and we'll begin with Ms. Faya Boone. It's Paula Boone. Paula Boone. My apologies.
Sorry. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you. I am here to represent all of New Lexington teachers. You know, as you've said, we never thought we'd be in this pandemic, right? But here we are. So with that comes new topics of conversation amongst the entire staff. And this weekend, we as teachers at New Lex, we got together and one of our colleagues wrote a letter that really just spoke to how we felt. Last week, we literally had a notification every week. Like, there was a joke, we're finally number one COVID cases, but we don't want that. But, you know, it's like sometimes you got to find humor in this. So I'm just going to start with this letter that pretty much speaks to the sentiment of, you know, K through 6. Some of the teachers couldn't be here. The ones that are here, we don't have children. No, just kidding. Some of us do have children, but, you know, we're able to come. So I'm just going to start with this. Since returning to school after winter break, I have felt less and less comfortable with our district's decision on how to deal with ongoing COVID crisis. Before break, we took proactive measures to help mitigate COVID spread by distributing tests. However, by only giving to those who wanted one and not requiring proof of a negative test prior to returning to school, left huge chinks in the armor. My site is the smallest in the district, yet has the most cases. We can see what happens when you ask, instead of tell people to do the right thing. Our collective health and well-being is reliant upon other people's decisions. Caring about people getting infected and or dying should not be an option. I also have concerns regarding the notification process of infected people on campus. For example, last week, a student of mine entered our classroom and sat down like every other day. Shortly after school began, I looked over and realized that the student was not feeling well. When I asked, the student mentioned being really tired and had a really big headache. So I sent the student to the nurse. At recess, went to go check on the student and had been told they had been sent to the isolation room because their siblings had tested positive the day before, and mom was told not to bring the student to school. Unfortunately, mom needed that babysitter to watch the sibling while she dealt with a sick child. Because our procedures only notified teachers of positive students, I was not made aware that my student should be on campus. Had I known, I would have not allowed my student to enter the classroom, putting others at risk, several of whom who had quarantined themselves. I understand there are guidelines we must follow to protect infected individuals, but at what cost? I know principals are doing what they can, but they are also overwhelmed with cases. It just seems like we are exposing the majority to protect the minority. I wish we could be treated like other professionals. We are trusted with confidential information. I want to know what proactive measures our district is considering to take at this time. According to CNBC, across the country, school districts are reassessing their plan to mitigate the spread. Some are switching back to remote or hybrid learning for a short period of time. Others are using a modified schedule similar to what we did at the end of the school year last, where students would go home before lunch and continue to learn online until the end of the day. New York City will double their testing efforts of vaccinated and unvaccinated students, even if they are not showing symptoms or have a record of being in contact with someone who is positive of COVID. The Los Angeles Times says that Culver City Unified will have students stay home the entire week of January 17th in hopes to stop the spread between students and allow those who are infected a chance to recover without missing more instruction. What is our plan for spring break? What is our district looking to do differently to avoid a second explosion of cases then? And so that really just spoke to pretty much all of us at New Lux, teachers, certified staff, certificated, classified, I mean. And then these were other concerns similar to this one letter. And I just wanted to share because these people took the time, I mean, my colleagues took the time to write, even though they couldn't be here, but I just wanted to express on their behalf. They also shared the same concerns, but also, again, this person had 2 students who tested positive. Then she had to isolate herself from her family this prior weekend, wear a mask at home, in fear that if she caught the virus, she would even give it to her husband or her 7-month-old. Vaccines only seem to make symptoms not feel bad, but it doesn't keep us from catching the virus. What is the district doing to make sure our safety and our family is safe? We have been seeing parents who are sending their kids, again, to school after they've been positive, and we are the last to know. And we're the front ones, in the classroom. And also another teacher wanted to just express the frustration of, everyone's not on the same level in terms of when you can return back to work. Her principal tells her 10 days, the nurse says 5 days, but then it's different for maybe someone who's in the cafeteria so it's really frustrating when the messages are mixed and we're just kind of like, we don't know what to do. And then last week for my partner and myself, we had a really interesting case where someone dropped the ball somewhere in Aspire. There was a miscommunication in contact tracing. So we had students in both our classes, my partner and I, where we weren't supposed to have them in class, but we didn't get notified of this until Tuesday night, and these kids have been in contact with us. So for some reason, something happened with Aspire where they only pull certain students, but those other students, so it was on a Friday evening, I guess. And on Monday, the students that weren't supposed to be there showed up anyways, but we had no knowledge of this. So of course, we let them in, and now we were unnecessarily exposed to the virus when it could have been prevented. So it's really been frustrating for us just to try to be healthy, be there for students, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will continue on with our second public comment, and that is from Mr. John Slayton.
I have a simple question with regarding to agenda item G7. Looking down the list of obsolete equipment to be recycled, I find 28 Hewlett-Packard laptops from Potrero. And my simple question is, would it be possible to hold back about 10 of those and repurpose them for work that we're doing at Durfee? You may want to discuss that when the agenda item comes up.
Thank you. Do we have any written communications?
No written communication has come forward.
Thank you. Okay, and now we'll move on to board members, starting with Mrs. Kobian.
Thank you. I first want to acknowledge our speaker and all that you said, and just really appreciate you and everyone who's definitely on the front lines and trying to help keep everybody safe and in school and learning as much as we possibly can. One of the things I was going to ask about is actually getting some more direct communication to parents, maybe regular reminders that, and and I know, I watch the news a lot. I try to read as much as I can, and I get confused about, how many days is it supposed to be? What is, what qualifies as a close contact and that sort of thing. And I think maybe if we regularly kind of provide that update, or even just, I know last year when school was open temporarily, or we kind of reopened, there were the daily check-ins. I don't know if we necessarily go to that, but something where we're regularly having to acknowledge, I am not, I'm not sick, my child's not sick, to sort of do that self-attestation in a more active way. So something to kind of, help to trigger for parents, just that conscientiousness, right? Because we know that a lot of people definitely care and definitely want to make sure that their kids are safe. Other people may have, needs at home where they feel like they have to send their child no matter what. And we really want to make sure that that doesn't happen, or that there's maybe alternatives provided, or connecting with families in that sense. Related to that, just some comments I've been hearing, emails I've gotten from teachers, just wanting to make sure that our dashboard is very clear in terms of what it does show, what it doesn't show, in terms of who's on campus, or how the numbers that are off. Possibly adding to it a factor of how many new cases daily or weekly, so that we can see, because right now the numbers show just a total, as opposed to, because some will drop off, some might be added, so we have a sense of if it's representative of one new case or 5 new cases, because it does make a difference in kind of looking at the situation at the school. And then I think I really just wanted to say I appreciate all that the district is doing in terms of providing resources for vaccinations, for testing. Hopefully everybody knows that the dashboard, the federal resource is open, so you can log on through the Postal Service and request 4 tests per household. And I think just to publicly remind everyone to get vaccinated, get boosted, it's probably the best thing we can do to get out of this. So thank you all, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Copion. Ms. Mendez?
Thank you. And once again, thank you so much, teachers, for being here. I know after work, we all just want to go home, right, and change our to pajamas. So thank you so much for being here. And we always love to hear from teachers and hear what's going on. As a public school employee, I can attend to some of the things that I'm also here on the news and what the teachers shared, where, you have this shift with, for one example, right, like we were saying, the teacher saying, Ms. Colbion, just being really clear, making sure the communication with 5 days and 10 days. I know it's not even just our own sector, it's everyone's sector, right? Like some are still doing the 10-day model, some are doing the 5-day model. And I know for some of my colleagues, it was confusing because they didn't realize that it had been updated, that before you had to do a PCR test from a doctor, and now the home test is being accepted to show that you're negative. So a lot of them were staying home because they were waiting for their test results, and they didn't realize it's in the details of the email that said oh no, now the rapid test also was accepted to show that you're negative, and they were staying out extra days because they were waiting for that test. So I think in general, it's always good to examine okay, how's our communication plan? Is everyone on the same page? Because then people are using their extra sick days when they don't need to, and I'm texting them no girl, you could use the rapid test. You don't have to continue using your sick days. So I definitely recognize that. I also recognize the staffing shortages that we've been experiencing, and thank you so much for district staff for being there to help subbing classes. I know personally I also was subbing these last 2 weeks, some special education classes, so I was able to also see firsthand the challenges it's presenting with our staffing shortages. And now we're seeing, at least where I work now, that the teachers are back, the aides are now out in our special education classroom because of the quarantine they're having to experience. So yes, it has been challenging, but thank you so much, teachers, for still showing up, for being here. Thank you for our district staff for always being collaborative and being very responsive. Not all districts provided a COVID test, right, to their students before winter break. But now we have feedback, okay, we have spring break, how can we be better prepared for spring break, knowing that it's a few months away, right, as we continue this pandemic. So that's just a few comments I have on that. Some other announcements I just want to share. One of our roles as a board member is always to be aware of the different Senate bills that are being passed or in the pipeline, right, that are going through the Senate or the Assembly so that we can advocate. And so I just kind of wanted to highlight, I was online the other night kind of doing some research because I had seen that something pop up on my social media, but there's a Senate bill that was signed by the governor. I got really excited by it, and it was authored by Assemblywoman Luz Rivas, that we're going to be the first in the nation to create a process to identify and support dual language learners in preschool. So that was huge because typically, right, we don't identify children who are English learners till kindergarten, right? In kindergarten, that's when they're identified. We start assessing them with the LPAC, and then we're able to provide interventions for them and knowing what type of instruction is really exciting. That I always knew there was that gap. So I'm so happy to see that at the state level, they're recognizing that we're now going to start identifying our dual language learners earlier so that we can start helping guide instruction and the needs of our dual language learners. And another one that it was actually our Senator Susan Rubio actually helped pass was regarding, it's SB 14 regarding pupil health, school employee and pupil training. What it specifically is that, when a child's absent, it's usually just marked illness, but it doesn't differentiate between, is it like a physical illness or with mental health or behavior. So now we're going to be able to code like it's illness due to mental health, which is so important, right? As we now have, so parents are able to now call in to say, actually, my child's out because of, whether it's because of depression, and to know that they have that option. Where before it's like, well, you can only be absent if you're physically ill, right? If you have a fever. But now that parents know that there is an option, like, no, if your child is experiencing some type of behavior or mental health, that can be an excused absence. So thank you, Senator Rubio, for that, authoring that bill, because I do see that as a need, especially as we're becoming more aware. And again, fighting that stigma for mental health, that parents will feel more comfortable to have their child stay home if it's due to a mental health reason. And then lastly, I was just seeing the other day that our Mayor, Jessica Ancona, is hosting a Winter Warmth Drive at Progress on Main starting January 27th through the 30th, and it's to support our Emergency Resource Association. So they are collecting clean, new, or gently used blankets, jackets, or socks. Okay, and that is between January 27th through the 30th, and the drop-off location is Progress on Main, which is in the Valley Mall on Main Street. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Mrs. Rivas.
Thank you. Wow, what a meeting already, right? Jenny Lee showed us a picture of March 2020 and the food distribution where we would just drive through and say how many kids were either in the car or in the home and collect our food. And it really brought me back to that time, right? There's the heaviness there, and then at the same time, this gratitude for our food service workers in our district that was feeding the community so well in those days. And here we are now in 2022. We didn't expect to be dealing with all of the things that we're dealing with now. And thank you to our teachers for coming, and you, Paula, for speaking to us and sharing the concerns and the worries, the errors, the things that can go wrong and that have gone wrong. So thank you for sharing about that.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt really quick? Sorry. I just wanted to say those concerns I forgot to add. Like I told Steve earlier, I saw him at our school helping our office coordinator, and it made my heart feel like really good. Like just to see that we're all helping each other. And today, Dr. Garcia, when you sent out that email about our PD days, it's like we needed that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, I can't imagine. My heart was warmed when I saw that notification about the PD days. I can't imagine how that was received. So thank you for sharing that too. And then Ms. Castro, you shared beautifully about the work that the students are doing and the progress that the students are making because of the hard work of our teachers. And and all of the staff people working together. So it's a lot to take in and process. I think I'll be processing this first part of our meeting for a long time, but I really do appreciate your presentation and you sharing, and you as well, Mr. Slayton. Thank you for being here.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Seegers?
I have a number of items too, and I have to begin by talking about mask etiquette. If you wear glasses, which many of you don't know, if you do wear glasses, that you suddenly fog up and it looks like you're in London or in San Francisco, so it's hard to read through with the fog. Number one, I'd like to say that I'm very happy to have noted that at Durfee School, that there's no longer double parking there. There's a staff person out there telling parents do not double park. That's wonderful. And also I'm getting many positives about our district's COVID dashboard. People are looking into that and they're saying this is unique because in many other districts they don't do that. So we're keeping the public informed. The young ladies here would be very happy to know that for the first time in many, many years, the Girl State girls, the delegates, will be going to Sacramento. So they will have equal access to the officials, the Sacramento at the Capitol building. So it's going to be a major change. I mention that because so many of our girls end up in the high schools and they become delegates to Girl State. And also I've been asked by a number of Marines that we could look into starting a program with the young Marines in our district. And I'd like to report that we were successful. At the last minute, my wife and I were asked by the Rose Parade people to furnish translation for Univision so they could narrate the Rose Parade. My wife is still upset about that because I said it was a simple job. It took 20 hours to do it, so she's going to forgive me someday. Also, there are many people in our community that are Vietnamese, and they're interested in starting a Vietnamese dual immersion program in our community. Another one that is everybody who lives in the 49th Assembly District, we're having an election in February for a new assemblyman. Our assemblyman, Ed Chow, was termed out. He's now a judge. I'd like to thank the staff at the Jeff Seymour Center for preparing for the Garden Club to come back and have the meetings there. They were really wonderful in the way they received us there. Also, a number of retired teachers are asking me if they're allowed to come back and volunteer in the classrooms, because they are a special group, by the way. They're just not parents or people coming up to help. These are credentialed teachers who, if they're vaccinated and have proof that they're okay, they would like to come and volunteer in the classrooms. And I think by us not doing that, we're really missing a great opportunity for our children to be tutored by credentialed teachers, a special group. Let's see, one more thing here. I forgot to say Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seegers. And just wanted to share same sentiment as what each and every one of my colleagues here on the board has said, really. These are definitely challenging times, but we know that, and this is a proof that we have such a collaboration with our cabinet, our administrators, everyone working together as a team in collaboration, our teachers. So another thing, thank you to those that provided public comment today. So with that said, oh no, I am forgetting something. My apologies. I did attend the South El Monte Emergency Resources Association event where we distributed Christmas baskets. And let me tell you, that day, the weather was really bad. Raining, pouring, but I was just so amazed on the commitment. We talk about commitment in the El Monte City School District, and that is definitely what each and every one of the people that were involved, from volunteers. I saw our community liaisons, of course, our board president Indra Arellano. I saw our president of the organization, Lillian Ray, the coordination of Mr. Ricardo Padilla, everyone involved. I even got to see people that came from other communities volunteering for such a great cause. It was well put together and coordinated, and of course, thanking our Senator Susan Rubio and Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio for also being part and donating, our administrators, our staff that also were involved in this process. So thank you all, everyone that was involved. Also, I do want to mention and thank the Wellness Center. They came through with over 500 PPE kits, personal protection equipment, for all of those that attended that day of the event. So on to another thing that I want to mention is, as you know, the National Association of Latino Elected Officials will be having and hosting the NALEO Charla for Education Policymakers, Student Learning, Assessing COVID-19 Impacts and Looking Ahead. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to also participate and be engaged in that conversation. And thank you, Dr. Garcia, for making a few copies, so that way each and every one of you can take one home and consider participating and also attending. So with that, we'll move on to our approval of minutes. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Mrs. Cobian. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Rivas. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any comments, questions? With that said, motion carries. And moving on to reports, the 2021-2022 Williams Uniform Complaint Policy Quarter 2 Summary Report. And with that, Mr. Salenbach.
Thank you, President Ruedas. Once again, before you, just to share, is the Q2 Williams Uniform Complaint Report that we are required to submit to Los Angeles County Office of Education, which looks at our teacher credentialing during that time. It looks at our facilities, and then obviously our textbooks and curriculum availability to our students. I'm pleased to share that for Q2, we had 0 complaints filed.
Thank you, Mr. Salenbach. Okay, moving on to our action consent items. Do we have any board members that have any items they would like to pull at this time?
It's number 7.
Number 7. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Segrist. Is there a motion to approve the action consent agenda minus item number 7?
I so move.
Thank you, Ms. Rivas. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Cobian. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any comments, questions? Okay, motion carries. Going back to item number 7, Mr. Segrist.
I will speak in spite of my fogged up glasses. Yes, I am very concerned about disposing of, in quote, obsolete anything. I'm just curious as to what that means, because I'll share with you. Years ago, a district I worked in disposed of its obsolete, in quotes, the computers. They were all Apple IIe's, Apple IIc's. They moved up to Macintosh. Well, we found out that all of those, in quote, obsolete computers worked. I bought one. Instead of paying $1,400 for it when it was new, I paid $35. My children, because of that, were able to go on and become computer wizards. There are 3 entities in our community that are interested, actually 2, that are interested in this surplus so-called obsolete materials. One is a computer company called CompuClinic. This gentleman is an engineer from Guadalajara who has a business here, and he's very interested in going to see those, in quote, obsolete computers, printers, and so on. Another is a company that buys e-waste. They're based here. A third is a company, it's a nonprofit in Long Beach. They will accept obsolete, in quote, computers, refurbish them, and give them out to local people in the communities. And I'm concerned when I hear obsolete. My computer is 9 years old. I'm sure it's obsolete, but it works beautifully. So I wish we would consider either offering these to people in the local community, even as an auction. Now let me explain to you. When I worked in the Jurupa Unified, they took their obsolete materials, they auctioned them off to the public under sealed bids. When I was at Rio Hondo on the board, the first time they had disposal of surplus property, they had pallets with 50 computers on them. Students were not allowed to buy them. A businessman came up from San Diego, bought all of them. So and then the next time we had an auction, and the college actually made money off of the materials, because if you're selling obsolete materials by the pound, you're not making any money at all by it. I have had experience on the East Coast meeting people who were buying used, in quote, computers from our communities here in California. So I would entertain that either we say, I would like us to table this item, bring it back in the future, and really discuss what obsolete are. I would like to go see them myself, because I have a very good background in computers, fixing them, getting them to work. So I would like to actually see these obsolete computers and printers. And I will add something else. A number of teachers anonymously have told me that when printers in this district are out of ink or toner, they are disposed of and they buy new computers. Now here's an example of what it costs to buy toners. I went to a local company, bought a toner for my Canon computer for $85. I went online, I found a wonderful source for $12. The toners work. So I'm just saying on this item itself, I don't want to belabor it, but I really think we're not doing a good service to our community when we're selling these out to a company called Tycoon that's not even connected to our community. So I would like us to look at this and seriously bring it back and offer people in the community the chance to check these, in quote, obsolete computers and printers and so on. Thank you.
I'd like to respond to your comments, Mr. Segrist, and I'm sure I'll turn it over to Mr. Herrera in just a second as well, because he can add some expertise. I appreciate the comments, and I do know that you feel very passionate about, making sure that we're utilizing district resources appropriately. Any of these products are purchased with public funds, right? So they don't belong to any of us, they belong to the community. Mm-hmm. And so in order for us to even do anything with them, the board has to deem them as obsolete before we can even auction or, follow any type of course. And so this would be, a board action where we say, these are no longer items that we're going to use in the school district. Now, I want to speak to the culture of how we get to items to become obsolete. So first and foremost, being a classroom teacher, I know that we hang on to things until the very, very end, right? And so we, sometimes there are good years like we've had recently, but we know that there are years where we just don't have the resources in the classrooms, and we save everything we possibly can to make sure that our kids have access. And so I can assure you that when a teacher reaches out, a school reaches out and says, these items are obsolete, it's because they have been used to the very limit. And then they go through a process that Mr. Herrera can explain, where we look at them here internally and we are able to repurpose parts. But for us to say that they've become obsolete, I can assure you that there's a process that we've engaged in, and we're doing our due diligence, once again, because these are public funds that we want to do, the right thing by. Recently, we've had the opportunity to purchase a lot of technology, right? The pandemic really, I think, pushed us into our one-to-one campaign, which we're happily we're there, and it's going to just be part of the district, our budget and the way we do, technology is going to be part of instruction. And so with more technology in classrooms and with students, I can assure you that you're going to see more obsolete items as well as more purchases. Unfortunately or fortunately, we have the ability to replace Chromebooks, but they do get damaged and they do break. And then we're able to, again, repurpose minute parts, but turn around and hand students a new device. And so you're going to see some more obsolete items that we're going to bring to the board in the near future. And I think there's an opportunity to have a further discussion on, how is it that we want to approach it from that perspective. But in order for us to do anything, to move any merchandise, this board has to say these items are obsolete, and that gives the district the authority to then dispose of items in different ways, and happy to engage in a conversation with any local vendor that would like to, I don't even know the process. I'll turn it over to Mr. Herrera. I don't know if they, if they bid on obsolete items, but again, happy to engage in that process when we get to that place.
Yeah, so regarding the process, as Dr. Garcia mentioned, right, the schools, maybe I shouldn't call them hoarders, but they hold on to things as long as they can, right? So by the time they call up the district and say, hey, there's no use for it. They're looking at it from one of two ways. Either it has broken down hardware-wise, or there's no use programmatically, doesn't fit into the type of curriculum or the programs that they're teaching. Now, our district team here will assess, right? Can we break it down, scrap it for any parts? Are there other schools that can maybe utilize that same technology elsewhere, right? To give you an example, we have a lot of Chromebooks that we've recently upgraded in the past, I would say, year or so. And we collected a lot of those, and we decided, we're going to keep some of them at the school sites. In the event a child shows up to school one day and forgets their Chromebook at home, they have a device that it's perhaps not the latest and greatest device, but they're able to power it up, have access to the internet, access their curriculum for the day, right? So it is a process that we go through. A lot of our technology has the logo embedded on it, right? And so that's something the board can consider, right? When you think about, the action of declaring property surplus, right? Whether we go the route of e-wasting it and you have to do business with a certified business that is registered with CalRecycle up at the state of California level to make sure that they properly dispose of it and follow the proper e-waste process where they give us the certification once they condense that down to a refinable mill type commodity. So that's a process that we follow. In the past, I want to say in the summer of 2020, we brought an extensive item to the board for disposal. We ended up e-wasting a lot of that technology, right? And there's a vendor that we utilize, Tycoon Materials, the same vendor that the high school district utilizes with their when they go through the e-waste process. They're local here. I want to say their headquarters are somewhere here in Norwalk, I want to say. And so that's the process that we follow. They give us all certifications, proof of destruction, all that good stuff, right, to make sure that we're in compliance with those laws, because there is laws regarding e-waste. Now, the board can always entertain going through a process of surplusing it and selling it to the community and things like that. Things to consider are going to be, a lot of these devices have the district emblem on them, right? And so are those devices that you necessarily want in the hands of community members out there, right? If it's still representing the district, right, to some extent, if you have the EMCSD logo on there. So, I can assure you that the process is being followed, right? The first action that the board needs to take is to make sure that they declare it surplus. And then from there, we can determine how we want to go about disposing of it. If we are going to e-waste it, right, then there is a process that we do need to follow if it's technology, to make sure that we're in compliance with all the laws and regulations. And we always do business with a certified vendor, e-waste vendor with the state of California through CalRecycle, because we don't want the vendor coming back and selling this technology, right? Like I said, if there's an expectation that we're going to e-waste this, right, we want that process followed. We don't want the vendor turning around and then selling the devices, right? And then we see devices popping up in the community in the hands of individuals that perhaps the board did not authorize, because many of the devices that we hold have the logo on them. You also see some servers on there and things like that. So there is a process that we do follow where to make sure that we have the latest and greatest cybersecurity systems in place, right? There is a point in time where we go through certain district hardware, right, that needs to go through that process. But for the most part, it's school hardware that is sent our way. And on this report, the first couple items are actually food services, central kitchen related items. So a lot of the focus, I know the discussion is technology related, but this action of declaring property surplus applies to any property that the board or the district owns, right? So it then authorizes the district to then proceed in that next step, and we're happy to entertain future conversations of seeing how we can engage the community if that's the direction the board wants to go in.
I still feel it would be better to offer this to local people than some company that's based in Azusa or Los Angeles or outside or Pico Rivera. These people are paying taxes to support our schools. Also, it's a good policy to do that. And I'll share some history with you. When I worked at Mulhall School and I had my own third grade classroom, I found some obsolete computers before they were going to be sold. Every one of them worked. And my kids had access to those computers when other people didn't. And I am really bothered by the term obsolete. Obsolete meaning what? It's 1 year old, 10 years old, 15. I can see non-working, but I don't see obsolete. If you're a person out there in this public that has nothing at home, and someone gives you a 6-year-old computer and a printer, and you've got something for your kids, that's a lot better than having nothing. And that's what I'm thinking about again. And the district I worked in before, they auctioned off everything to the public, and it made money for the district, and people bought, quote, end quote, obsolete computers like the one I bought, the 2C, for my children, work beautifully. And they called obsolete. I have problems with obsolete. And I'll stop with that. Thank you.
You know, again, thank you, Mr. Segrist. I do want to say that Lillian Ray was here with us tonight, and I remember one time visiting her, and I had some items at home that I was thinking about, you know, how do I donate these so that others can use them? And she was very clear about the types of donations that she accepted. She said, you know, people that live in poverty and that don't have resources deserve, you know, quality items. And so I'm very particular about what gets donated to me, because I don't want people of poverty to feel like they get, you know, hand-me-downs that have been used and worn. And so, you know, if it's the direction of the board to provide more technology to families, we can definitely do that, and we can do that with much integrity. I can assure you, and I can attest to, you know, the word obsolete means that the board is now saying that they're no longer going to be used on school campuses, and that we're able to, you know, move on, again, come up with a different plan for disposing of them. I don't think we have the capacity at this time to do auctions and to engage in that process, which, you know, I appreciate the suggestion, but I'm going to be very realistic about this moment in time. And I think it's an opportunity for us to discuss how, you know, if we want to entertain other ideas in the future. But I will say that because we are a one-to-one district, I think our kids deserve new computers that are, you know, state-of-the-art. We've been able to support families so that they can log on for ELAC and DLAC and school site meetings, school site council meetings, and we're happy to do so. And again, just following that philosophy of let's give our parents and our community the very best. And in this moment in time, we're able to do that. And so, again, happy to have a discussion about, you know, what to do in the future. We do have quite a list here of items that we'd like to move forward with, but it's at the discretion of the board.
And I would just like to say, kind of to that point too, and I appreciate that students feel like they have access to the best technology that we can give them. It gives good confidence in terms of what, you know, what they feel they're capable of, and that, you know, we trust them. And the reverse side of that too is that if we have this future discussion about items, you know, I'd want to make sure that the items we provide, you know, the sort of lemon law idea, right? We don't want to sell something to someone and then have it not work when we know that it doesn't work, and understand, you know, that sort of risk that we or liability that we may incur for something going wrong there. But I do appreciate the comment about making sure that we are using these taxpayer-paid resources as extensively as we can, and I think that's a very good discussion for us to have, and maybe some more detail about what it really looks like in the future. But I'll move to approve item 7 at this point.
I'll second, but with a comment that we did have a speaker in the audience today expressing interest in some of the items, and so I am understanding this as this is the step of just saying the district no longer needs these items, and perhaps there can be future conversations about that interest.
Yeah, and before we go, I'll make a comment too. Even the other day, I think what I learned as well, it's not necessarily the computer itself. It's all the processing. It's the software updates that is what is happening, right? And so even the other day, I had a situation where my phone and my laptop weren't communicating. I spoke to Apple, and they're like, well, again, it's not necessarily devices aren't working. It's just that as the software system gets updated on your phone, right, there's quite a few updates, right? You'll get that Apple notification. And then when the software on your laptop is obviously older, that's the situation that we run into, that every time we do a software update, it's not necessarily that the computer, but again, with Apple, they're constantly updating their software. So then where before there weren't so many updates with computers, right, with the software. But now with yearly or even sometimes twice a year, you're getting software updates. That's what then slows down, where if you have a laptop like mine from 2015, the reason, even the other day I asked IT, can I put the new software processing system on my laptop. They're like, your laptop can't handle it anymore because it's such a fast technology that even though mechanically your laptop's fine, it's just that it's not going to be able to process just how quickly Apple's updating their software. So I just kind of want to make that comment. That was something I learned the other day.
Okay, with that said, we have a motion by Mrs. Cobian, a second by Mrs. Rivas. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any comments, questions, further questions? Okay, with that said, motion carries. Moving on to our actions items. Item number 1, consideration of approval of purchase orders.
President Ruedas and members of the governing board, before you is the December 2021 purchase order report. There's 172 purchase orders listed on there, totaling $1.65 million. Some of the major purchases, we have $649,000 going to Houston Mifflin for some math curriculum. And we have $180,000 listed on there for some COVID-19 testing kits that the district purchased. You also heard Ms. Jenny Lee talk about the refrigerated food truck that the Department of Food Services is looking to purchase. On this report, it's listed on there for $129,000, a new refrigerated food truck for food services that should arrive before the end of the school year. And also of note on there is $64,000 to data impressions for some additional document cameras for various schools, some additional digital clocks that we're going to be providing over to our schools, and a $28,000 HVAC replacement for the Gidley Music Room. It's a little bit more expensive than the HVAC units at our homes, but that is quite a big facility. I think it's a 10-ton unit. So our facilities team will be working on that change out in the coming weeks whenever that equipment comes in.
Thank you, Mr. Herrera. Do we have a motion to approve item number 1?
I'll move to approve item 1.
Motion by Mrs. Cobian. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Mendez. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any comments, questions?
I abstain.
Okay, one abstained by Mrs. Rivas. Okay, with that said, motion carries. Item number 2, consideration of approval to adopt Resolution 21-2211, Celebration of African American History Month, February 2022.
President Ruedas and members of the governing board, our school communities are predominantly people of color who historically have been overlooked, and we want to make sure that we take the time and effort to spotlight their histories. So the theme for Black History Month for this year's February 2022 is Black Health and Wellness, and we want to join other organizations such as the Library of Congress, National Archives Records Administrations, National Park Services, the LA County Office of Ed, United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, in paying tribute to the generations of African Americans who struggled with adversity to achieve full citizenship in this country. Commemorations around the nation will chronicle the important contributions made by African Americans to art, literature, sports, and pop culture. So our job as a school district is to provide opportunities for our students to learn about various cultures, but we also serve a very specific demographic, and we want to make sure that they know their history. We know how important representation is, especially for our students here in El Monte.
Thank you, Ms. Castro.
I move to approve item 2.
Motion by Mrs. Rivas. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Cobian. All those in favor, say aye.
Is there a discussion on the item? After a second motion, you're supposed to have a discussion.
Okay.
And I'd like to discuss this matter in itself. I really agree it's important to recognize African Americans, but also I'm very discouraged that we tend to ignore others. We don't recognize the Italian Americans, German Americans, French Americans. I have a lady here who lives in our community who happens to be Jewish. She said, our district will never recognize the Jewish American people. And to me, that's terrible. Another person is Italian American. He says, well, apparently your district, our district, doesn't care about other people's. And he counted and said, we recognize 4 ethnicities a year. I think our country's made up of a lot more than 4 ethnicities. I think we're part of the United States. And if you look at your e pluribus unum, one out of many, I think we really need to recognize everybody and not just be exclusionary, because I have to defend that. A lot of older people that I know, they're not happy with that. They say, what about other people? Irish Americans, our kids know that you have to wear green on St. Patrick's Day. They have no idea about the Irish culture. We need to celebrate everybody, so I'll rest with that. And I'm happy to say that I celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, because mine also is in January, and I'm honored to be in the same month as that gentleman. Thank you.
I'll just say also that I do appreciate that the board, that we've brought, I believe it's World Cultures, and remind me which month that we do that, or which month we do that in.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. I
Sorry.
think it's in May,
Okay.
Multicultural Awareness Month.
Yeah, and so I think we do, and I do want to just speak to, I think the ones that we are selecting for specific recognition is also because historically these particular groups have not been represented, and I think even still there's a lot of controversy about whether or not there should be specific recognition of the culture. Not to say that others aren't, and I think we have added that to our calendar to celebrate all cultures, but I don't think that erases the fact that these particular groups and cultures need to have additional recognition to sort of represent that idea of equity that we are working towards in our district and as a board. And so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
If you teach history, teach all of it. Did you know that Italian Americans and German Americans were incarcerated in World War II? I think a lot of people needed to know that too. And I think, again, it's exclusionary policy. We say we believe in diversity. Well, apparently we don't reflect that when we celebrate only certain peoples every month and only 4 ethnicities. I think our country is made up a lot more than just 4. Thank you.
And I'll just chime in. I think I'm going back to the students, right? The needs of the students. And I know we talked about, after CSBA, about how we can include more student voice in the decisions that we make as a board and their input. And this is one of those great opportunities that when we, I know we do want to move forward with establishing a student kind of advisory group, especially like at the upper grades, so they can provide input. And that's one of the questions that we can ask for them. You know, are you feeling included? What are some things that the district can do to help, to make sure that you're feeling included? So that's just something that kind of popped in my mind when we're looking at the end of the day, we want to make sure what do the students need specifically, and ask them what they need.
So we do have the opportunity, we do collect, responses like that with the California Healthy Kids Survey, and we could disaggregate it, based on grade level, possibly gender, some ethnicities. So there is some opportunities to look at data from that perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a motion for this item?
We actually do, President Rivas. We have a motion from Mrs. Rivas and a second from Mrs. Cobian.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Okay, item number 3, consideration of approval to adopt Resolution 21-22-12, Celebration of College Awareness Month in California, February 2022.
President Rivas and members of the governing board, our college education and awareness is very important to our district. We have collaborated at great length with our Promise Foundation partners in creating our Cradle to College pathways to make sure that our community is very well aware of all the traits and skills that children need to know and have in order to be successful and choose to go to college if that's their choice to do so. The data that we share today is one of the examples how we are aware that children need to start thinking about college in elementary and middle school and also be prepared with the foundational skills that they need in order to be successful. We know that a college education can provide a child with many opportunities in life, so our job is to make sure that before children leave us, that they are prepared to excel in high school and therefore in college if they choose that route.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve item 3.
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any comments?
I'll just make a quick comment just to say I really appreciate all that the district does to make a college-going culture a reality in this community, and even, I mean, as you said, preparing them for high school and things, but even beyond that, the academic side of things, the support for families, the support at bringing together the community, because we can get a kid qualified to go, but they may not be able to afford it, or their family may not know how to apply. And so I think just all of the different pieces that this district does are tremendous assistance to families. And the results show in terms of the number of students who are going to college or thinking about going to college now compared with even just 10 years ago. So it's wonderful to see. Thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item number 4, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Board Policy 1312.3, Administrative Regulation 1312.3, and Exhibit 1312.3, Uniform Complaint Procedures.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Perfect. All those in favor? No, I'm sorry. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Consideration of approval of first reading of revised Administrative Regulation 3515.6, Criminal Background Check for Contractors. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Cobian. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Item number 6, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Administrative Regulation AR 4217.3, layoff rehire. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Ms. Mendes. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item number 7, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Administrative Regulation 5125, student records. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Segrist. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Item number 8, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Administrative Regulation 5145.3, non-discrimination harassment. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Segrist. Is there a second? My apologies. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Item number 9, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Board Policy 5148 and Administrative Regulation 5148, Child Care and Development. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Cobian. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Item number 10, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Board Policy 5148.2 and Administrative Regulation 5148.2, before after school programs. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I will second.
Second by Ms. Mendes. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Item number 11, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Board Policy 5148.3 and Administrative Regulation 5148.3, preschool early childhood education. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Cobian. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Item number 12, consideration of approval of first reading of revised Board Policy 6112 and Administrative Regulation 6112, School Day. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
second by Mrs. Rivas. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Item number 13, consideration of approval of first reading of revised board policy 6143 and administrative regulation 6143, courses of study. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Kobian. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. Item number 14, consideration of approval of first reading of revised board policy 6158 and administrative regulation 6158, independent study. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Segrist. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Item number 15, consideration of approval of first reading of revised board policy 6170.1, transitional kindergarten. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Kobian. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. And item number 16, consideration of approval of first reading of revised board bylaw 9320, meetings and notices. I move to approve this item. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Segrist. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. And now we'll move on to our section of discussion session with item number 1, annual review of governance handbook.
President Rivas and governing board members, as a commitment to keep our governance handbook updated, we have agreed to bring this item every January as a routine item to take a look at the governance handbook. If there's any additions, questions, edits that the board would like to make, we can proceed with accepting those and adding them, or if there seems to be more work to be done, we can also reconvene the governance subcommittee to work on that. So this is an opportunity for the board to take a look at the governance handbook and make some recommendations for how we can improve it.
Any questions, suggestions?
I'll just ask if we pause for 1 minute. Ms. Mendez stepped out.
Only I will add something if I'm not speaking out of turn, that I've shared the fact that this exists with a lot of other board members from other districts, and they're really jealous. They say, they've never even heard of this. I go, yes, you got to have something like this to really know who you are and what you need to do and how to do it. So some people are asking for copies of this. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's actually, so if anybody ever points to it, we actually can email it, or anybody can log on to Board Docs, and we always attach it as part of this item, and it's there for anybody to view.
Any other additional comments?
Just that I think that we were pretty thorough in this last calendar year, so I don't have any recommendations for changes.
Anything that our governance handbook committee would like to add?
No, I think, and I noticed things were updated for this calendar year, so I think we're
Perfect.
No, I think it looks great. Good job, subcommittee. No, I know we had just updated and did a lot of work on it, and so, but I'm so glad that we're still reviewing it. Thank you, President Alvarez, for putting this on the agenda so that we have time to again review it, because even I took the time to kind of be like, okay, let me review some information. So again, it looks great. Everything's up to date, and
Yes, thank you. And I also had the opportunity to review it. And so, yes, please know that I know that we had suggestions previously, but those have been addressed. So thank you very much for working on it.
You're welcome. And so there will be a hard copy on the dais. So when you come in and for any meeting, you'll have a hard copy of the governance handbook at all times. And of course, it's uploaded on Board Docs. It's uploaded as well as part of the board member portal or page on our website. And this is, if there's ever an opportunity or if there's some suggestions that the board would like to make to update it, we can definitely bring it forward in a future agenda item.
Perfect, thank you for that.
The only thing I would just,
Go
since
ahead.
we just approved the new update on meeting and notices, maybe after the second reading, we can definitely
Yes.
get that board policy.
So that goes for all board policies after the second reading. Those are uploaded and those are approved. And then so we'll just replace that particular board policy to reflect the changes of the law.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much for that update. And now we'll move on to number 2, CSBA Coast to Coast Federal Advocacy Trip. And I know that there were some, suggestions that to do this as this is actually the first Coast to Coast event from a CSBA in Washington D.C. So wonderful opportunity, right? That we can definitely have to that we can go ahead and have to form or engage with educational policy makers and administrators, right? And find those possible solutions, right, to end the educational achievement gap for all of our students. With this, I would like to see how everybody feels about that.
Well, and if I can just provide a little bit of background, it's actually part of the governance handbook. One of the things that the board had previously agreed on was to itemize conferences and professional development opportunities that were good experiences for the board to engage in and that they could freely participate. And then there was a commitment that if there were any other conferences or opportunities for professional development that were not listed, that a board member could bring it to the attention of the board, and then the board can deliberate on that. And then we can add it to, my recommendation would be that if the board approves a new conference, that we wait for the board member to attend or board members to attend. They come back, they share their experience, and then based on that recommendation, we can add it to the governance handbook for future opportunities to participate. And so before anything else, the board would need to make a decision whether this is something that you would like for our board to participate in. And so we have provided the documentation that CSBA shared as part of the documents for this item for you to deliberate and consider.
So something, I think this is a neat new idea. So I know it's the first time they're doing it, but what I think I would advocate for among our board is to maybe prior to if one or more people are going, to have a discussion about what the goal is for our board. The CSBA Lobby Day in Sacramento is always a good experience, but what I've found the times that I've gone is that it tends to be much more about CSBA's agenda as opposed to necessarily what we might be needing locally. And so I think I would I'm okay approving this to add to our list, but I just want to make sure that it goes with that caveat that we have that discussion beforehand, and maybe we have a briefing, for those who are going, that sort of like, these are the key points for our district. These are the things we can, celebrate and share. And I mean, our iReady test scores are, the things that we're doing really well, because that could then in turn put some really positive attention on what we're doing here nationally. So it's a good opportunity. I just would want that to be a part of it as well. So that's.
I can go next. I really thought about this last night, and I do have some hesitations on my end, and I'll just, these are my personal opinions, and I'll share them with the board. This is the first time CSBA does something like this, right? And I'm thinking about, no matter what, this is money that we're spending, right? So I'm being conscientious that, when we go to a conference, at the end of the day, these are public funds that, we have there's the payment for the conference itself, right? And then there's transportation, and then there's lodging, and there's our food. And obviously, a lot of our conferences are based in California, so we're very aware of that, San Francisco, San Diego. I know we have only one NALEO that is typically out of state. So I was just thinking about that, like the financial impact. Again, if we do this, then that's great. But I just want to make sure that we consider that it's the first time CSBA does it. So part of me is just like, I want to see them kind of do it for the first time and then maybe join after. And I was also thinking about COVID, right? Take into account that if we're not allowing our students to, to go off to, like, how does it look as a board where, we are going to DC, thinking about COVID, the rise in COVID numbers right now, and, again, how does that reflect as a board if we do that?
We
And
have
then-
suspended all field trips for indefinitely until the surge actually decreases, and most likely through the end of the year.
Exactly. So we're always wanting to be aligned the same way that we have our board meetings in person, because we know our students are in person and our staff are in person. So I thought about that. And then also going back to state advocacy, I do want to revisit, I think Ms. Willis, you mentioned this. This made me think about how can we really strengthen our state advocacy first, right? I think we all, like, that was I've only participated in CSBA's State Legislative Week one time online. Hopefully, I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know. I looked online. I don't think they're going to do it this year. I think they're doing federal.
I haven't seen anything either, but I can follow up.
I looked on their website. It looks like they're doing federal. So it kind of prompted me to say, okay, before we commit to a federal advocacy trip, and again, that's a financial investment, maybe first relooking at, hey, before we start advocating at the federal level, what are we first doing at the state level to advocate? And reaching out to our senators, our assembly members, and being more aware about the Senate bills that are right now in the process. So then if we know they're going out for a vote, that we're making a commitment to say, hey, everyone, email, make a phone call to, Susan Rubio or to, Ed Chow to then advocate for something that's going on right now that's going through, whether it's through the Senate or the Assembly or the Senate or the governor. So those are my personal thoughts on this. So I would have hesitation for this year.
Anyone else? And I think those two are great points to just really focus on. We need that information aspect coming from CSBA, perhaps reaching out to them, right? Because they announced it back in December, but how does that look like right now? And just coming back and say, where are we now with the surge of cases? What's happening? Is this even something that is in the plan, right? But definitely going back and to piggyback on what Mrs. Colbion mentioned, definitely going there with specific objectives and goals, right? If we are going to do this, and if we do this, I think this would be a great opportunity to engage with others. But obviously going back to doing our research, as mentioned by Ms. Mendez and Mrs. Colbion, really focusing into that and seeing how we're going to go there. It's just it's not a trip, right? We're going to work, right? So knowing exactly what bills have passed, what bills are in that process, to really keep going with that mindset where we have these goals and this is what we're here to do. So maybe we can find more information, right, on and reach out to CSBA to see.
I'm wondering too, it might be a good opportunity for us to, we've talked about it and COVID kind of got in the way, but engaging more locally too with our congressional representatives in this area, because I know California tends to lead the way a lot in terms of education and things like that. And so, so maybe that's a part of it too, or an alternative of doing that work here at home. So to help better inform them, when they're in DC and doing that sort of thing.
I like what you're saying, what all of you are saying. Right, because I hear what you said, Ms. Colbion, that CSBA has a specific agenda, right, that they would like the board members to speak on when they are at a CSBA event, which would make sense. But it would make sense for us as a board to think about, well, what are the messages that we care about that are particular to our community, and what would be the appropriate places to advocate for those things. And I do remember that conversation earlier, that it actually may be just the local offices that we can just drive to and show up and just do the work, right? So it sounds to me like really probably a next step, like you're saying, Ms. Redas, is to find out from CSBA what's your agenda, what's our agenda as part of CSBA, right? But then do the bigger work as a board to figure out, well, what are the key things that our district really needs to ask for?
So idea from all these wonderful ideas. I know our community engagement representative is Yvette Kim, and I know she frequently sends out emails. I'm wondering if we can maybe reach out to her and maybe, in a future study session, she could come. And I would love to know, okay, what are the current Senate bills that are going on the floor? What are some ones that are high interest to us? And maybe consult with her, like what would be the best way for us to advocate, whether it's setting up, individual kind of Zoom meetings with our different representatives, or, email or phone call. So I think that would be a great way if she's able, I know she's always reaching out to us if we need anything. So I would love to know at the state level, and then I'm sure she has information at the federal level as well. So I think utilizing that resource.
I definitely agree. And this is what we've done in the past. I think we've all had the opportunity to experience CSBA Legislative Action Day, right? And previously to that, we get on a Zoom, and they pretty much provide everything that's happening in Sacramento. And I think that that'll be a great opportunity also to maybe ask her, right, for some information in regard to that.
Yeah, and if you guys would like, I can reach out to her. I'm finishing up my term on delegate assembly, and she's the pacer for the delegates. So if that's something you guys would like, I could send the first email and then maybe get her in touch with the superintendent.
Yes.
That would be great.
Okay.
That would be great.
Okay. So then we come back to this as soon as we have more information to keep the board updated. Perfect. Okay, moving on to number 3, Equity Subcommittee update.
President Rivas, governing board members, as you know, we've embarked on this journey to define equity for our school district and create a policy, create statements that we believe in as a board. We've been working with Nicole Anderson to start this conversation. We're halfway through the conversation. We decided to pause a little bit on that work because we wanted to do some more in-depth introspective work here as a board, so that we can in turn really visualize what these actions will look like once we have defined equity for our school district. And so I'm happy to report that Mrs. Rivas and Ms. Rivas and I have met twice since our last board meeting to discuss this next step. And I'll give them the opportunity to share some of their comments regarding the subcommittee work. Ideally, we have been reading several books, and so we'd like to bring these books into our conversation to help inform, what your vision is individually as a board, and collectively transform that into not just, again, a policy or a statement, but actionable items that we can say, this is what we're ultimately working towards. We'd like to call for a special board meeting on January 31st. It's a Monday at 5 o'clock to have a conversation amongst board members. And the subcommittee has has developed some questions and some statements for you to consider as you're reading the book Shattering Inequities. And also the board was asked to read another book by Mr. Feldman on grading. The idea is that you use the guiding questions and statements that we'll share with the board very soon to bring in some of your thoughts and ideas to this special study session, again, to have a conversation as a board to really help inform, that polishing equity statement and policy that'll ultimately be the work that we do as a district.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Just to also add to that, the readings, and so grateful for that. Those have been instrumental, right, resources as we've had the opportunities to engage in these conversations. They have definitely opened up the dialogue. And as Dr. Garcia mentioned, definitely please keep those into as you're reading. I'm not sure if you're completely done with the books, but please, I know that in my case, and I'm pretty sure Mrs. Rivas can also agree with me. Definitely brings forward many questions, right, as we're reading along, and definitely that's the conversation that we want to open up for on January 31st. So I know that it has definitely opened up many questions and in different categories. So yeah, we'll come back on January 31st with that conversation. So.
Yeah, thank
Mrs.
you.
Rivas?
Right, so please read the book and be taking notes as you do. And Dr. Garcia will share some of those. You know, when we start talking about these things, right, your mind just goes everywhere because it's big and it's important and you care. And so I think that the comments or the statements and the questions will be really helpful for reflecting on. And I think it was helpful for me to remember that, you know, right now in the world that we're living in, we're really thinking about the big three: diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And equity is one piece of that bigger movement, right, or the bigger effort. But it's a really important one that we have to actually think really deliberately about and act really deliberately on. And so, yeah, so we can really be thinking about what does it mean what does success look like, and what does it mean to ensure success, and what does it mean to provide kids with what they need? And I think some of those questions that have been prepared will be really, really helpful for reflection while you read, but then also will guide us as we come together in our study session.
Thank you, Mrs. Rivas.
So I'm hearing consent on study session for January 31st.
What would the time frame be?
Maybe 5 to 7 p.m. Does that work for the board?
Yes.
Yes.
Would an earlier time
No.
work for the board? No?
I rarely get here.
5 to 7 it is. January 31st, 5 to 7. So we'll post that on our
Okay.
board calendar, and we will be following up so that we can prepare for that study session. Thank you.
So read books.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Number 4, cabinet reports.
Thank you, Board President Ruedas and members of the board. So just a quick update from Business Services. Mr. Salenbach will share a little bit more regarding the updated health officer order that came out over the winter break. So our team proactively purchased some PPE, right? Today we got word that we got 5,000 K95 that just arrived, right? We got another 25,000 that we're picking up tomorrow from LACO on behalf of the state. And we got another 50,000 or so that should be arriving by the end of the week if all goes well. And we're prepared with all the surgical masks and everything to maintain in compliance. Our facilities team did a wonderful job over the winter break, and the first couple of days when kids and staff came back, replaced all the HVAC filters across the district and changed out all of the HEPA air filters and the purifier machines. So that was good. We did that proactively to make sure that we just have additional safety mitigation efforts that are in place. And then another quick update regarding our attendance. So we recently submitted our P1 ADA attendance report. As you recall, we submit 3 attendance reports each year, P1, P2, and the annual report. Our attendance is a little bit down this year compared to prior years, obviously due to the pandemic. And as you may all know, about a week ago, Governor Newsom came out with the state proposal for the budget for next fiscal year. And there is some language in there that would change the way school districts get funded. So instead of looking at the grader of the current year or the prior year, as far as ADA, which really helps declining enrollment school districts, they would take a 3-year average going back 3 years. So that would help us if that goes through. More information is coming out. We have a lot of trainings this week and next week to learn more about the governor's budget and some of the information and programs that are included in there. But overall, it's a good, strong budget for school districts. We hope that continues to hold as we get into the May revise and the official budget gets signed in June of 2022. And thank you to the board for accepting the audit report. We're pleased to report that there was no audit findings. So it was the first time in a couple of years that, actually more than a couple of years that we had no findings. So thank you to our fiscal services team for eliminating our fixed asset finding that was there for many, many years. So we're pleased to present that clean audit report to the board with 0 audit findings.
Thank you, Mr. Herrera. And now, Any future discussion items coming from the board?
Ms. Reyes, we're going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to turn it
My
over to
apologies,
Mrs. Castro.
my apologies, Mrs. Castro.
Thank you,
Mrs.
Mrs.
Castro.
Reyes. Excited to announce that next week our district will be engaging in the Great Kindness Challenge Week along with the Department of Education. So the week of January 24th and 28th, our counselors and our community liaisons will be spearheading activities in our school communities to focus on anti-bullying, on kindness, self-awareness, self-control, social, emotional activities, processes in order to promote the Great Kindness Initiative. And I also wanted to share that we will be posting this soon, so I'd like to invite the board to join us in our celebration of Lunar New Year. The Wednesday, January 26th, we will be celebrating via Google Meets origami making, a Chinese New Year presentation, and a tiger drawing because it is the year of the tiger. And on Friday, January 28th, we will be having a Vietnamese New Year presentation, a cherry blossom craft, and creating a dumpling meal. So those flyers in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese will be posted by our Robert Dosmati to our Parent Square. So I'd like to invite you all to attend and join us.
Thank you, Mrs. Castro. Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, President Redis. I wanted to take this opportunity just to update the board on some of the recent county health department updates, but also kind of go through some of the processes that we use here in terms of COVID and COVID safety. I think some of it may address some of the questions or concerns that were shared today, just to kind of give that overview of really what goes into place in terms of the entire process. And so, as Mr. Herrera alluded to, that over winter break, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health updated their K-12 protocols. And so when we came back, we immediately had to take a look at those and actually look at implementing them. They gave us 2 weeks. They gave districts 2 weeks to implement these new protocols. Mainly the protocols talked about requiring masking outside, which we already had in place. That was one of our initiatives from the beginning, that we would wear our masks outside, and then we'd have those mask-free zones for students and staff that wanted that ability to kind of take a breath of fresh air. The other aspect of it was required masking of all employees at a medical grade level or higher. And that, we're pleased, as Mr. Herrera shared, we actually were very proactive prior to winter break, and we were securing a lot of KN95s and a lot of medical grade masks just to have for our staff. But what we did was we actually wanted to try to push out the KN95s, which is a little higher level than your medical grade mask and so on. And so we were able to push that out to all of our staff members, and then along with the medical grade mask if they would like to do that as well. And so we continue to try to secure those types of items so we can continually provide the higher level of face mask for all that would like to have it. The other piece was that there was a change to the quarantine protocols. And so there's a difference between isolation and quarantine. Isolation is when someone tests positive or is exhibiting symptoms, they actually go into isolation. Quarantine is for someone that is exposed to someone who has tested positive. So what we call a close contact. They use the term exposure. And so Los Angeles County Department of Public Health updated the quarantine specifically for adults, where we have the definition of fully vaccinated, which means you've received both doses. And so as a fully vaccinated person prior to spring break, if you were a close contact, you could remain at work as long as you were asymptomatic. And so what they did was they added the aspect of having a booster. So if an employee was fully vaccinated but did not have a booster, we were required to quarantine that person for 5 days if they were a close contact. And so that was even in their private life too. If they were a close contact with anyone at home, we were required to notify them that they needed to be quarantined for the 5 days. And so once we were able to go through that, we actually sent out that information to all staff on 1/5, basically kind of highlighting the major changes, letting them know that masks were coming, The key that we had 2 weeks to put this in place, but we were actually going to be putting it in place in about a day or two because we had everything ready to go. On 112, the county health department decided that they wanted to upgrade the quarantine requirements again because they were hearing districts talking about our inability to staff, just due to the aspect that more people were testing positive and then more people were being required to quarantine because either they were A, unvaccinated, or B, they maybe just didn't have that booster yet. And so they updated the adjustments to their quarantine requirements, and they basically took off that booster requirement by just saying, okay, so if you're fully vaccinated without a booster, you can remain on campus so long as you're asymptomatic, but then you need to take a COVID test on day 5 from exposure. And specifically, they're referencing the rapid COVID tests, or the rapid antigen COVID test, just because rapid antigen COVID tests actually look at whether a person's infectious at that moment. A PCR test looks at your antibodies kind of more deeply, and so anyone who's ever tested positive will probably test positive with a PCR test for about 90 days. A rapid antigen test looks at that moment in time and tells you whether or not someone is infectious or potentially infectious. And we see that even in the isolation orders that were changed by the Department of Public Health that basically now say that after 5 days of being in isolation, you can actually come out of isolation. The difference for us in a workplace is you can come out of isolation, but you also have to have that negative rapid test because then that's telling us that you are no longer infectious. You'll experience symptoms probably for a couple weeks, but as long as you're fever-free for 24, your symptoms have gone down, you can come out with a negative rapid test. And so that came out in about 111, 112. We were on conference calls discussing it, many districts involved. And then so we immediately started to change our protocols and how we notify individuals, informing them, some of them that we had told that they had to go home because they didn't have a booster, and saying, oh, by the way, you can come back now because now you're clear per the new protocols. And so we updated our information, and then on Friday evening, we sent out notification to all staff members of these new changes. Since Friday, we've heard that there may be another change because originally what they listed was unvaccinated could come back under the modified quarantine, and now they're saying, oh, no, that's not really the case. So we're going to wait and see the actual document. So we may be making another change to our quarantine process, hence why you see people sometimes sit there and say, well, is it 10 days? Is it 5 days? Well, it's both, and it depends on what you want to do because it's 5 days from when your symptoms develop with a negative test. But if you test positive, then it could be day 6 or day 7, or you just stay out the entire 10 days. And we know that after day 10, on day 11, you can return without a negative test. And so a lot of information, a lot of changes, a lot of updates all the time. And so we try to keep our employees and everyone abreast of all the changes that come up. Some of these are things that have been in place for a while, just minor tweaks and so on. But we try to do things a little differently here in El Monte City School District as well, where a lot of times when we're doing our contact tracing and our notification of employees, we're actually not sending them an email saying, or sending them a document saying, oh, this is what you can do and live it. We actually make the phone call or send an email directly and explain it in detail and then ask them to contact us, or we contact them to go over it with them because we know there's always questions. Along the lines of upcoming changes, the state has changed the school contact tracing policies in regards to where they're kind of looking at it as we have a classroom. One person, let's just say I test positive in our classroom here, where currently what we do is we contact trace to determine who the close contacts are, and we notify those individuals. We provide them testing if required, and then nothing else. Well, because of the extensive amount of time that takes, the state has gone to an approach of, I test positive, we just assume everyone in the room is a potential exposure. We're going to send you all notices, and testing is not necessarily required. And so the local county health is looking at that option as a viable option for districts if they so choose to do it. Some districts shared their desire to do that just because of the amount of time and the lack of resources and so on. And other districts shared, while that's a great option for those that can, for those districts that are currently operating under the current tracing model, we'd like the flexibility to continue that. And we are one of those districts that actually advocated for that. So we'll watch and see what in this coming week if County Department of Public Health issues those changes with some flexibility, in regards to specific contact tracing. Our concern is, that approach of, someone, tested positive. Now everyone else in the room is potential exposures. Our concern is that lack of communication with those individuals and providing them information that they need. So that way they're fully aware of what they need to do to ensure that they're keeping themselves and their families safe at home. And that's not just our employees, but that's our students as well and their families. So that leads me to the contact tracing process. The contact tracing process for us hasn't changed since day one that we've been here. We still use the CDC definition, which means that within 6 feet of a positive case for 15 minutes or more cumulative. For us, contact tracing is triggered based on when we're notified of a positive case. And so I'll give you an example. Over the weekend, we had quite a few positive cases that we were notified on. Immediately, the admin began contact tracing. I was involved in contact tracing. My personnel in my office were involved in contact tracing or communicating as well. And so then what we're doing is identifying who those potential close contacts could be. And then we're taking the next step and we're actually reaching out and making phone calls. And that's where we're different than many other districts out there, because currently the minimal requirement is that if we identify a close contact, we just have to provide them documented notification. So you'll get an email through either Parent Square. I, for one, received one for my daughter in high school, basically informing me that she was a close contact. And then you can, you should do this, monitor for symptoms, so on. You should probably get her tested, those types of things. We believe in, we're going to make that phone call. We're going to say, Mr. Sollenbach, your child was a close contact. They're fully vaccinated. Therefore, here's the options for you. This is what you need. Test on day 5. By the way, we have rapid tests. Come to the school office, pick one up, and we'll give you one, provide you with it. But that takes time and takes a lot of staffing as well. But we're still committed to doing that because we think it's the right thing to do, and we do that not only for our students, but we also do that for our employees as well, where we actually try to reach out to them. We may be emailing them, gathering information, and then we're making contact over the phone to answer any questions they have. So that leads to the period of contact tracing, and so any time that we have someone that is tested positive, we look at when their symptoms began or when they actually took the test that led to a positive result if they're asymptomatic. And then we look at the 48 hours prior to. For example, on Monday, we didn't have school. So if we had anyone that notified us that they tested positive and we ask them when your symptoms began, and if they say, okay, my symptoms began Sunday night or later, we know that 48 hours previous to that was not Friday when they were in school. Therefore, we do not have an obligation to contact trace that because they were not on campus during their potential infectious period. But if that 48 hours happens to fall when they were in school, then we have a legal obligation to contact trace, which then we look at our seating charts, we contact the teacher, and we say, okay, Mr. Sollenbach was in your class, here's a seating chart, did you move around that day, and so on, because we also want to notify the teacher or various or a classified staff as well. We go through that process, identify all the close contacts, and then make a determination for each person based on their vaccination status and based on their whether they're symptomatic or asymptomatic, or what they need to do. And again, reach out and communicate with them and so on. As I shared, that's not necessarily the process any longer in regards to that personal communication, but it's still what we do because we feel it's the best thing to do as well. Ms. Boone, who I've known for a long time, shared kind of the communication aspect of it, where there may be a student that whose sibling was identified as a positive case, but the sibling came to school. Well, we have to keep in mind that sibling is vaccinated. They technically are a close contact, but as long as they're asymptomatic at that moment, they are allowed to come to school. And so there's a lot of factors that come into play in situations that play into it. So while we have this sort of overarching guidance in terms of what we need to do, it's not a one-size-fits-all because what may be happening with me and my symptoms is much different than Dr. Garcia and so on. So I might have to do something a little different than she. So that's where it kind of varies, and that's where that personal communication makes a big difference because you can ask them, specifically about what's going on with them and provide them at least the feedback or the guidance we hope that would be appropriate for their situation. The other thing I just kind of wanted to update was in terms of the dashboard, dashboard is something we've had for a while. We've always used it to reflect what we say is our current active cases. And we define active as a case that is within that 10-day window. And so going back to isolation traditionally has been 10 days. Even though now we say it can be 5 days if you have a negative test, we still view it for 10 days. And so anytime we're made aware of a positive case and we do our contact tracing, and then what I'm doing is I'm updating that dashboard. And so I'm in the process every day of adding cases. And then at one point I take off cases that are outside that window. For example, today's, the 18th, huh? So if we had a positive case that was identified and they were on campus today, then this is the start of that 10-day window. And then on the 28th is their 10th day, the 29th, we would take that case off. We feel that's the best way to kind of represent really what's going on at all times. I know that there's been questions about the number of cases in a day and so on. And while I have that information, I could easily provide that information. I think what it doesn't do is it doesn't provide accurate information about that situation, because just today, I haven't checked my emails, but I've been getting updated emails through this evening. We probably have about 20 cases that we were informed of, but they weren't cases that were on campuses today. They're cases that maybe a couple were today, some were last Friday, they were on campus. I had one from the 7th of the month. And so while we had 20 cases identified today, not all of them truly reflect today's on-campus, situation. And so we can easily look at sharing, how that might be. We had 20 cases today. My concern would be making sure that we identify the fact that those 20 cases identified today don't reflect that those students or those employees were on campuses today, because I think that's what everyone is really concerned about. Understandably, is who was I potentially exposed to today, and so finding that way of doing it. There's also the cumulative approach. How many cases have we had on our campuses over the course of this year? Which I have that information because I track every single case, on a spreadsheet, and I can easily tally that. The hard part with that too is a few different things in terms of one, we've actually been taking the rapid test as a positive test, where the local county has not necessarily identified that yet. But we just use that as a precautionary measure, and so we're going to respond and act on that. And number two, we're seeing individuals, and I use the term individuals because I don't identify as a staff or a student. When I put out information, I say we identified an individual, because it could be either. We have individuals that have tested positive for the second time because they could have had the initial variant, of coming in, or even Delta, and now with the new variant, So sometimes our numbers for a cumulative isn't necessarily 100% accurate or reflective in the fact that we have multiple individuals who have tested positive more than one time, And while I identify my information for the dashboard by student or employee, so I have an understanding, I don't identify that information by person. So to go back and track whether that same person has had it a few times, we'd have to go through our county records as well. So I share that just because, there's a lot of thought and a process that goes into our dashboard. I think our dashboard, even in the last week, I've updated some of the language on our dashboard. Because I always used to use this phrase, just because it makes sense in my crazy mind doesn't mean it makes sense, right? So I view it through the lens of COVID that I understand pretty decently, but someone who doesn't, I need to then reword it. So we've updated that language as well to clarify, active and what that means. We've asked a few, individuals, what can we do differently, or what are you looking for, and so on. Gotten some feedback on that aspect of it. But always open to suggestions from the board as well in terms of directions they want us to take on that. But I just wanted to kind of give some background on the dashboard and why we reflect it the way we do. Because right now, if you look at it, you'll see the active cases that were reported minus the ones that we've reported since we've been sitting here, because I updated it prior to coming over. And tomorrow, what you'll see is more updated cases, and then probably not till the 20th, you'll see cases drop off. So And then finally, just, as Mr. Herrera shared, we've been proactive in our PPE purchases and so on. We're pleased that we're able to provide as many KN95s or other safety measures for our staff. That's been, at the forefront of what we do since day one is in terms of trying to ensure the safety of all of our staff and our students as well. But where I'm really pleased at is our proactive, approach in terms of testing and purchasing of our rapid tests. We started purchasing rapid tests November just to have them on hand. And then we started, we found a supplier in Florida through our LACO grant, and we were able to get them in. And so then we started utilizing them for our modified quarantine, because the original modified quarantine for families was that you had to test on day 1 and day 5. And many of our families were having trouble finding access. So we actually got approval through LACO through County Department of Health to use our rapid test because they're FDA approved. We have nurses, so we could use those as valid tests prior to them becoming sort of the common thing that's being used like now. So we started purchasing those like crazy, and then Cabinet made the decision to purchase all of the rapid tests to send home with all of our students and all of our staff prior to winter break. Just something we felt would be nice for our families to have, just sort of as a precautionary measure with no expectation that they utilize it, because again, we also didn't want to go down that route for those families that just didn't want to test, right? Because we know that we have some that feel that way in regards to it. And then what happens over winter break, the governor announces we should have testing for everyone, right? And we're sitting there going, we're good. And so we've been fortunate because we've now received all those tests, and now we're able to utilize those tests to offer every single close contact, probably the 60 that were identified today, a rapid test that they can use on day 5 because that's a requirement. Any of our employees as well, if they're a close contact, or if they notify their close contact at home, I'm going to hand them a test because I want them to be safe and I want them back on day 5. Any employees or students who have tested positive, the new isolation order, day 5, negative test, next day you can come back. So I've been able to bring back employees, and students have been able to come back on day 6 or 7, where they would have then had to stay out all 10 to 11 days had we not had all those tests. And I think the big thing that I'm proud of with our district is some of the pushback that many of the districts are giving the county health in regards to these changes in orders is that their inability to provide the rapid test. They don't have them. But we do, because we actually were proactive prior to break and so on. So I just wanted to share all those. I know I threw a lot of information at you. I think I took everyone else's allotted time for their cabinet updates, but that's okay. But I just wanted to make sure that you all had this information. I'm always open if there's questions or anything I can clarify, because there's a lot of information there, which is understandable why many people in the surge, they're nervous, and so our job is to try to make them feel comfortable. But I also know that we're going way above and beyond, what is required, and I'm proud of that in our district.
I just wanted to say thank you for all that. I mean, definitely appreciate all of the proactive efforts, the forethought, all of it is really great. Something while you were talking, I was wondering, in terms of the dashboard, would it be possible to maybe note the number of in-school transmissions that have been identified or not identified in terms of, I saw it, I looked at several different dashboards. I think it might be LAUSD does it, but I think maybe as a parent, looking at it, thinking, okay, it's probably, I'm assuming, much more reflective of, what's going on in the community rather than what's going on in the school. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it and you see these cases and you think, oh my gosh, there's 15 at my school, but it's kids who are doing something outside of school. So I can feel very safe and comfortable with my child being at school, knowing that it's not, that's not where they're getting it. So anyway,
yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'll take a look at some of the dashboards. I've looked at other districts' dashboards, and that's sort of why I kind of sit back and I'm like, oh, I really like our dashboard because I think it's really a true reflection of what's going on, not necessarily just cumulative.
Right.
But yeah, I'll take a look and see what's out there. What comes to mind sometimes on those situations is, especially right now, I would say back in November, it was pretty easy. Right now, you have individuals who are identified as a close contact, in school, but fully masked,
Yeah.
a lot of times behind barriers like that. And at home, also have another family member who has tested positive. And then they test positive. County Health will automatically probably consider that as a school exposure because they're not aware of the home situation. They're only aware of what we report. Because our reporting requirements are, if I test positive, my information is shared with them, and then every other close contact is shared with them because there's notification requirements and so on. So, but I definitely will take a look and so on, and I think if that's a viable option, if it helps, I think our community feel a little more at ease, I think it's a great idea.
And if I can just jump in, you know, the dashboard is not required of us. It's something that we wanted to do when we first came back to the new school year in August as a way of being transparent and sharing with our school community. And so I think that stays true. We want, people to know what's happening in schools. So happy to look at different models and happy to, I guess, really represent this moment in time as well. Quite frankly, I'm not sure that the dashboard had any traction prior to this surge, but clearly people are logging on now to see what's on that dashboard. And so that's an opportunity for us to say, okay, how can we communicate via these numbers? So we'll take a look at that.
Yeah, definitely.
I also just want to add my thanks. You're like basically now a public health worker. Yet you're sitting here. I mean, this wasn't really what your job was supposed to be, right? But you're sitting here with all sorts of like knowledge, really in-depth knowledge, and kind of like nerdy enthusiasm about the details. But I really appreciate it. Just how in-depth you really truly understand and follow all the changes. And I know at this point you got to do it. But I can see that you're doing it with just a wholehearted effort to have things go well in our district. So I really, really appreciate that, and the tone with which you do it, and the way you address questions and answer questions with all sorts of patience. I think it's really wonderful. So thank you.
I appreciate it. And I couldn't do it without our staff. Our principals, our support staff, they've now become contact tracers, and then the staff I have in my personnel office, right now I'll probably get off and we'll be communicating about what's going on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We're all communicating. We're all, basically jumping in and doing what we need to do along with our admin and our site. So I appreciate it. Thank you for that. But I couldn't do it without the support staff that I have. That help out in this process as well. So.
Mr. Segrist?
Yeah, I truly appreciate all your hard work. I was going to ask you something. Have you noticed the little testing facilities along Peck Road in Northgate, and there's one on Basie and Peck? I was tested this morning. This is my 5th time I've been tested, by the way, and I had something very strange. They offered me a really 15-minute result for $100. Is that common?
That's your rapid antigen. That's the test that we
Well,
provide.
I'm not paying $100 for that. I'll wait for 3 days.
The $100 is because they're not out there right now, and that's what we're seeing. I think if you
the only time I've ever had anybody say that, because at Kaiser's it's like 3 days or 2 days, but these people saying 15 minutes for $100 to give the result.
Yeah, so there's the difference in the two tests. And when I'm emailing people, I'll describe, I say a rapid antigen test, and I'll put in parentheses, one that you get results in 10 to 15 minutes. That's the type of test that basically measures if you're infectious right now at this moment.
Okay.
And then your PCR test is the one that takes 1 to 3 days. Well, now it's probably 7 days because, depending on where you go. That's your test that basically looks at your antibodies, for lack of a better term, and you'll test positive for that for the next 60 to 90 days is what they say. So that's where we've seen a shift recently, and that's where this big push for the rapid antigen tests have come in. Before, everyone looked at them and they weren't, considered a viable option. But now, because of the change in isolation to 5 days and then the quarantine aspects for us in terms of that, that tells us if a person is infectious at that moment. And if they're no longer infectious, then they actually are safe to go about business, as long as, they just need to continue to monitor themselves. Symptoms will probably continue, but that's the test right now that everyone's looking for, and they're not out there. And so that's why, unfortunately, people are taking advantage of it and charging that kind of money.
And one more sharing. 2 weeks ago, I was tested over at Kaiser Hospital with an appointment, It took 3 hours to get it. The cars were everywhere, so beware of where you're being tested.
Thank you, Mr.
I
Solomon.
will be brief because I know that you have heard from quite a bit, and Mr. Sollenbach did take up my time. No, all of that to say that this, I think it's a testament. He's definitely transformed himself into a public health officer for EMCSD, and that goes for all employees, right? I think, there's work that we started off doing that we were very passionate about, and this pandemic has definitely added more to our plates. And a testament to that is, the teachers, right? The teachers that were here to speak on behalf of the staff and the questions and the concerns that they have. I want to acknowledge that because I think there's lots of questions. We're doing our best to try to answer some of those questions to clear up the confusion because there have been some recent changes. We're waiting for one more update from the Department of Public Health, and then our plan is to put out, something like a flow chart or an infographic so that people can have a very clear understanding and understand that, it's nuanced based on a lot of different conditions. So our end goal is to communicate, to support, and definitely to get to the root of issues so we can quickly try to problem solve and then move forward. So we'll be looking at the dashboard. We'll be examining some of the concerns that came forward at New Lexington to make sure that we can get to what those issues are and how we can support the teachers and the staff there. I know Mrs. Cobian shared earlier, I do want to acknowledge that the website is live from the federal government in order to access the household tests that will be mailed out to families. And so Robert did a wonderful job of pushing that out today. We'll continue to remind families so that they can have access to those tests. While testing is important, we know that, it's going to be information that we're going to encourage them to share and then think about ways to really get families to connect with us so that we can have this information as they're testing. There's more tests at home that are accessible. I want to acknowledge the board. Thank you for adding another meeting to the docket. So we'll be meeting on January 31st at 5 p.m. for our study session. And then just lastly, I just want to celebrate, I know that there's just a lot of things that are happening, but, as a district, we continue to do really good. Just hearing Jenny Lee's presentation, right, that just summarized all the wonderful work that's happening. The vaccines, we are close to 4,000 vaccines that El Monte City School District has provided to the school community. I mean, those are just really wonderful things amongst many, many others. And there's a lot of small little moments that are really leaving their footprint in everyone's hearts that are happening in classrooms, in schools, in cafeterias, in playgrounds. And so I just want to acknowledge the work of everybody. We're going to give people, our staff, an opportunity next week to take a deep breath, and we're going to work with just our staff so that they can enjoy some personal time next week. So thank you for the patience. I know we went extra long this evening, but there's lots of information to share, lots to celebrate, and lots to do.
Thank you for that, Dr. Garcia. And with that, we'll go on to number 5, future discussion items. Any one of our board members like to mention at this time?
I'd like to have one item. So we're just talking about advocacy, right, at the state level, federal level, and that's something we've talked about in the past. I'd like to propose, if anyone's interested, I know I'm interested, if we want to do a subcommittee on advocacy. Then that way, the subcommittee, we could meet and we could look at, the current bills that are right now on the floor, and then create a plan on like what would be the best action, whether it's submitting a letter on behalf of the board or setting up a Zoom call. So if anyone would be interested, we can always talk about it in the future, but I would definitely be interested in that.
I would also be interested. I like that idea. Thank you.
Any others?
It sounds like a great idea.
I do. I'd like us to agendize discussing volunteers in the classroom because I still feel that a lot of retired teachers have so much to offer and they're willing to come in and unpaid. And I'm sure that our children can take advantage of that and they'll benefit from that. And they'll all be, tested for COVID and everything else. And the argument is they're credentialed. So if somebody in the public says, oh, how come they're going in there? We can always say, well, we have substitute teachers coming in. Why not have retired teachers I think that might be something that we could really consider doing to help our kids and the teachers too, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Segrist. Any others?
Just want to thank Ms. Redas for leading us today. Congratulations on your first meeting, leading as board president.
Thank you.
First full meeting.
Full meeting. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Rivas. So just to go back to the suggestions made today by Board Member Mendez and Board Member Segrist. So these are definitely wonderful ideas. So we'll definitely come back to these. Okay. So before we adjourn, I just would really like to extend and thank our entire school community for, please know that we definitely value that great work that you're doing, your commitment, your dedication for our students, for excellence in education. And I mean, these definitely are challenging times, but, and we're going throughout all this information, right, and all these changes, and some of them can definitely be drastic, but nevertheless, our El Monte City School District stays committed and continuing to prioritize the health and well-being of all of our students. So thank you very, very much for that. We definitely value that. And with that, I would like to adjourn our meeting at 8:01 p.m. Thank you.